To awaken the masses with our intuition, calling out the corruption with no inhibition. To open this podcast, sparking a revolution. We're not afraid to stand tall in a world full of deceit. We're the voice of reason, bringing light to the street, keeping it real, never missing a beat. Open this podcast where the truth meets the heat. Open the earth, cracking open the lies. We're rolling out the stuff, we're here to rise. Bearded alpha male, saving the youth from the godless demons. Spreading the truth. Joe open the podcast where the truth will never cease. Join us on the journey to bring back peace. We're rolling out the stuff, fearless in our release. Joe open the podcast where the lies will decrease.
All right. It did it automatically. We're getting more technologically advanced by the show, you guys. It's nice to be here. Nice to see you guys. We have Donny Brook in tow. Hope everybody had a good weekend. It's going to be a good show. We got tons of tons of news. Got one breaking story here that Trump has announced the JFK files are to be released tomorrow. So we'll dig into that a little bit. The U.S. to bomb Iranians in Yemen, which could escalate into Iran potentially. So, and if so, that would be the first new war to break out under Donald Trump's leadership, which, he prides himself on no new wars and things like that. So this will be interesting to get into. Got a couple other things. The erasure of Christianity, what's going on over there as well in that same area, basically. Trump declares Biden's Autopen pardons void. That's a huge one. And we got Trump deportations update, amongst a bunch of other things that we're going to get into. Dan Bongino is now officially the deputy director of the FBI. And so, we're hoping for the FBI to start doing a little bit better than what they've done so far. We're still holding out hope, or at least I am, that Kash Patel and then Pam Bondi as the AG. For some reason, it's a brain fart. I always mix AG and district attorney up. I don't know why, but
she should go back to being a DA, in my opinion.
Pam Bondi is AG as well. Her legacy is basically right now teetering on the release of the Epstein files, which we're not going to get into until we have actual, real, tangible news, if there ever will be on those files. Like I said a couple of shows ago, I'm just done talking about it. But hey, we got a new one. We got a new list to talk about, the old JFK files. So will it be a rinse and repeat of what we've already seen, or will it be something new that we can actually have some meat that we can dig our teeth into? I guess we'll find out tomorrow. But
yeah, I mean, if we're using the 24 hours that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi operate with, if Trump using that same time scale, I think we'll get him in 4 weeks and counting.
It's good to see everybody in chat. It's the Alt Companion. He asked the question, going over to the or made the statement going over to the Jar Openers channel. Some of you guys might know, we are separating our show from our individual channels over to the actual Jar Openers podcast channel on YouTube. So we're hoping more and more people will migrate over there sooner than later, so that we can actually shut the show down on our individual channels and just have everybody in the same place. All of the chat can be in the same place, all the likes, all the shares, everything. And that way we're not confusing the YouTube algorithm like we have been. So want to start getting some traction here. And thanks to you guys and your help, we can get it done by moving everything over there. So feel free to, if you're on one of our channels, America First TV or Atlas Thugged, to go over to the Jar Openers channel. that'd be great to see you guys over there as well. Also, like, subscribe, share, send it to your group chat, all that good stuff. And so yeah, Atlas, Donny, good to see you guys. It's the first time I've met Donny face to face. Got a nice beard, fit in perfectly.
Right.
You know, it's funny is I've had a long beard for a long time, and now it's just kind of just whatever.
Right.
I've just totally let it go, man. It's gonna go wild. It's like down to my belly button by this point.
Nice.
It took me longer than the last time I'd seen you on camera.
Yeah,
For those
I trim it
unaware,
occasionally, but that's it.
right. Well, no, for those who aren't aware, me and Donnie actually used to co-host originally on Offensively Accurate before we eventually just like merged all of our momentum into America First TV. We had a lot of good conversations on there as well. What's funny though, and it's going to be a point of discussion, what we're going to talk about actually, is the fact at that time, Donnie was definitely on the libertarian train, still a good bit more than where he's at currently. I think a good bit of what you've probably seen in the news, as well as experiences that you've had, we can get into that, has kind of led you away from that. But I kind of just want to give you the floor, give you a chance to kind of speak for yourself and what's brought you here.
Great. Yeah, so I'm Donny Brook. I am an aging punk rocker and political junkie. Mostly that's kind of it. Yeah, I was definitely somewhere between libertarian and conservative before. But I came back to Christ. And that's a lot of people think that probably softened my views on things, but it didn't at all. It definitely had the opposite effect. I've become far more nationalist. Overall, for sure.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think kind of like the train I was on, I was already going from pretty basic, normal conservative to repetitively feeling like I was being lied to, like there were certain things going on that I couldn't see, kind of leading me to a different direction as well. But with influences like Joel Webbin, I think Stone Choir, a lot of groups in that kind of fold kind of shaped me outside of that as well. Ultimately, we're kind of like in different positions now. I might be to the left of you on certain things, maybe even now at this point. But it was just a good kind of development to watch. But I think that's kind of the general trend we're seeing, period, in the space as well. I think a lot of young men who have been raised libertarian their whole life are falling out of that. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the return to Christianity, the return to Christ, the kind of influences that in the underground, it seems to be that being a Christian nationalist is about the most punk rock thing that you can be right now. And so it's kind of cool to see like the political environment kind of change hands like that, especially as, 20 years ago, it's complete opposite. The most punk rock thing you could do would be to, be anti-church, right? I don't go to church. I don't let my parents tell me what to do. And now we're on the whole different side of that. And I guess I want to ask you then, what was that kind of breaking point that shifted you all over to Christianity from where you were at previously?
Well, I think I disagree with you that it's punk rock to be Christian now. It might be rebelling to do that, but as far as you go to punk rock concerts, they very much are open with the fact that they don't like you and they don't want you there. As far as like right-wing punks, they just call you all Nazi punks. They all have patches on them. It's just, punch Nazis and stuff like that. So I don't know that I agree with that, but the event that really brought me back was I believe I met God, and it wasn't in a church, and it wasn't a priest. It was a it was a homeless guy at a truck stop in Indiana, and I was on a road trip to go bury my aunt in Kansas with my parents. And I met this guy that was stuck at a truck stop in Indiana, and I had a moment that changed a lot of my worldview and sent me back to church. And I'm working on getting used to being back in church. They all want you to be a monk. I'm not a monk. I'm never going to be a monk. So I maybe butt heads a little bit with the church community still, but I'm enjoying it so far. It's good to be back.
Nice.
No, that's good to hear. And I know we had a message privately about that experience, just like talking through it, because I know that you in that moment definitely was like, there's no way this is real, but also facing the fact of like everything in my body is telling me that this is real. Like I don't know how to deal with this. And I think it was ultimately the thought I had was I thought that was awesome. I think that there's definitely points in time where God definitely calls to people, especially when they know they're ready to hear something. And I thought that was kind of an amazing development, especially because of so much we kind of butted heads on politically on the show leading up to that point, was just how far you would be willing to use or wield, I guess, like kind of like authoritarian power, right? To kind of for the greater good versus like the individual sense and fighting for the rights of the pure individual and the freedoms that come with that. And it's a crazy story, right? Just like the fact that it comes from a homeless guy of all places. But God works in mysterious ways.
It kind of
And,
makes sense though, doesn't it? Like,
right.
Where if Jesus walked among us, where would he show himself? I mean, that might be the exact place he'd do it, you know?
Right.
And I can go more into the story if you guys want, or I can keep it vague, but I mean, either way, that person was there for anybody to go embrace them, you know? I just happened to be the one that did.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you want to, yeah, definitely. What was like, I guess that moment you realized that you were no longer talking to a homeless guy. You were talking to something greater than that.
Yeah, and I know it sounds like a kind of a crazy story, but so we're on this road trip to go bury my aunt who unfortunately OD'd and died too early. And my parents didn't want to fly. They wanted to drive out there, and I have some family out there, but not a lot, so they're kind of isolated from the rest of the family. So I decided to go with my parents, and I also wanted to keep an eye on my parents. I mean, they're getting older. My dad's not quite the fighter he used to be. So I was a little nervous with them going by themselves, so I tagged along, and the services were, really touching. And I remember thinking to myself, like how strong my family's faith was and how well they were able to handle these big losses. And I had that thought, but it didn't linger too long. Anyways, on the way back, we stopped at this truck stop, and I'm a smoker, so I'm hanging out outside. I'm having a cigarette. Um, I'm also always armed, which kind of comes into the story because I'm not much afraid to go talk to somebody. I know how to throw hands, and I'm like I said, I'm armed, so I'm not considering this person a threat. But
Right.
I see this guy in front of the gas station, and he's talking to himself. He almost seems like he's angrily talking to himself. Um, and he was right near the front of the store, so I think I'll have a cigarette. And he seems a little unpredictable, so I'll keep an eye on him, make sure my parents get in and out without bother. And they come in and out, and neither of them really address this guy at all. And they get back in the car, and I tell him, why don't you wait in the car? I'm gonna be a minute. I'm gonna go talk to this guy. Because while I was watching him, I had noticed he's got a big old trash bag of stuff out there, and that's when I realized, okay, so he's not like an angry truck driver on a Bluetooth. At this rest stop, I realized, okay, that's all that guy owns is in that garbage bag. So let me see if I can, help him out. And so I go over to the guy, and I have dark sunglasses on, and I dress a little funny, and he's kind of looking skeptically at me. But I walk up to the guy and I say, hey, are you stuck out here? And he cautiously says yes. And I said, can I help you? Can I help you in any way at all? And he said, if you'd like. And I said, could I give you some money? He said, if you'd like. And I went to start fishing for my wallet, and he asked if I could take off my sunglasses so he can see my eyes. And I think that's kind of odd, but it seems like a fair request. Let me do this. And so I take off my glasses, and I look him in the eye, and I give the guy a big smile. And then he asks if I have Jesus in my life. Again, I thought that was kind of an odd question. And as Atlas knows, it's a complicated answer. At the time, at least it was, because I was educated in the Catholic Church, brought up by 14 years of CCD, confirmation, all the schooling and stuff that goes on with that. But then I left the church. So when he asked me that, I didn't want to give this guy that complicated answer. I just wanted to give him some money. So I've got a big old Celtic cross on my arm, so I pulled that up, and I showed him and I said, I don't go anywhere without Jesus. And you know, it was true. I didn't leave God. I just left the Catholic Church. And he smiled and he immediately kind of like welled up with tears. And I said, anyway, let me give you some money, and I take out my wallet and I've got like $20 on me. It's like my last $20 in cash, but I have a bank card. I've got credit cards. Like I'm not worried about money. So I
Right.
try to give this guy my last $20 and he doesn't want to take it now. Now it's my last $20. So now I'm kind of arguing with this guy almost a little bit. I'm almost begging him in the middle of the gas station, look, take this. I'm going to be okay. I've got money in the bank. I've got credit cards. I'm with my parents. Worst comes to worst, I'll make them buy me dinner. It's not a big deal. Like, please take
Right.
this.
Right.
And he asked one last time, like, are you really sure you want to give me this money? And I was like, dude, at this point, I desperately want to do nothing but give you this money and a hug if you let me give you a hug. And like, I'm emotional just talking about it. And I'm not one of those guys that gets, emotional, but I'm like, I'm in a gas station parking lot hugging this homeless man that I just desperately want to be okay. And we're both like borderline crying in the middle of this rest stop. And it was a life-changing experience. Like I felt God in that moment. I felt it. His name was Chris, which I also think is a bit on the nose. So if God's listening, maybe call yourself Steve. Chris is a little too on the nose for me, but like the whole experience changed me, and I didn't talk about it for a while. I mean, my parents, like, I had to explain enough to explain like why I'm hugging a homeless man at a truck stop in a state that I am not from and I don't know anybody. But like,
Right.
I didn't really talk about it for a while after that, because I kind of just needed to think about it and what it all meant. But like, you hear people say, I had this moment and I found God. And like, I always kind of like, always thought maybe they were a little crazy, or they were saying things like that to get attention, or to have people think that they're virtuous or they're worthy of that experience. And I'm none of those things. I'm not worthy of that experience. I'm not a particularly virtuous person all the time. Like, so I kind of always thought they were a little crazy, but it's different when you feel it yourself, and it's not a feeling that somebody else has to convince you that they had.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's awesome. I remember you telling me, getting like detailed paragraph messages and all that. I'm reading them. It's like late at night too, and when you were telling me what had happened, and I just like, yeah, there's really no other way to describe it besides he knew that you needed spoken to in that moment. Like you were someone who was on the fence and needed like that little bit of nudge, and now it's kind of fully taking you in a different direction. And I think it's amazing, and I do appreciate you sharing the story as well. Because I remember you telling me, and I know how much it had moved you, especially kind of like at that high point as well. Um, so much kind of moving politically, and you being a political junkie, same as me, same as Worrell, I would say too. We're kind of tuned into a lot of these things. And so when you're presented with a lot of new evidence, it feels kind of rough. There's a little bit of mental discomfort that comes with changing your stance, even on smaller things. But it changed the whole foundation of what it's built up on. It's like a whole different animal when it comes to like, especially how you feel. What implies, I guess, what you think about specific topics. It comes from a different lens that way. But I think that was a great story.
Oh yeah, thanks for
it's
letting me
amazing.
tell it. Yeah, no, it definitely changed me completely overnight. Luckily, because of all the previous things we talked about, and how finding out how the world actually works, which I've known for a long time. You get accustomed to rebuilding your worldview.
Right.
You know what I mean? So luckily I had some experience with that. It wasn't the first time my whole world had crashed and I had to rebuild the thing. So
Right. You're watching the Zeitgeist movie for the first time.
mhm.
You're like, wait a minute, jet fuel doesn't do what?
Oh
You're
yeah.
gonna get your mind blown open like
We don't
that.
have time for that, that's for sure.
Right.
You're not going to get those documents either, though. They're not going to tell you shit about it.
Right.
For real.
It's been 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
good.
you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
I told Donny not to cuss in the first 5 minutes for the YouTube algorithm stuff. So yeah, we're 19 minutes in, bro.
Good. I'm good. I'm not necessarily as As clean speaking as you two. I curse like a sailor. I'm working on it maybe, but
No,
not
you're
so good
fine.
at it.
It takes time to get into the TV brand speaking, but you get used to it after a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. I'm the same way. When me and Atlas are not live talking to each other, I'm a lot more sailory. But
Well, I wanted to say too, I think the overall thing with this is the fact that we're all embracing Christian nationalism, which I think is what I hope. I don't want to project because I'm obviously biased with what I see in the news content. But my hope is that that's what the younger generation moves to as well. And so I think, whether they get experiences like that or we just begin shoring up the men and women who actually do speak and hold values, they're also representative of the fact of Christian nationalism taking the forefront, especially when we're moving on to like what we're going to do for implying laws in the future. And I say this all the time when it comes to being offensive with how, we kind of operate politically, what we want as a vision for ourselves for the future, right? What we want America to be looking forward, not just always reacting to what the left is doing, just having to figure out how to put out fires that another team is doing and kind of moving away from that lens and being like, actually, both parties kind of really suck. So here's what we need to do moving forward to adapt to that as well. But yeah, great story as well. One last question, I guess, before we got into the news content specifically that I had. I wanted to kind of get your idea as a political junkie, what your biggest issue you think is. If you had to name one specific issue that we as the conservative group, Christian nationalists, anybody who fits that mold, needs to be all hands on deck for like the next couple of years, if not for the next 4 years.
Yeah, we need to take a serious look at shadow powers. Shadow powers in our government. I mean, there's the obvious Israel, dual loyalty citizenship and APAC lobby stuff, but there's also just tons of these secret societies that wield political power. And JFK gave a great speech on this where he spoke about how we need to put the light on these things. The reason that they're secret societies is because they don't want you to know their agenda. And I think we need to deal with foreign powers in our government, but we also need to deal with these like satanic powers that wield real political power in our country, things like Freemasons, Jesuits, all these secret societies, as well as the less secret dual loyalties and lobbyists and stuff. We need to really focus on these things and remove their power, not only from our government, but from our schools and from our churches and from literally society in general. We need to completely shine a light on all of these sketchy organizations because, we discuss Israel a lot in the Discord as a foreign agent that controls political power, but less so do we talk about the fact that sometimes you have an election where both candidates were in the same secret club in college. I don't want to see that
Right.
any more than I want to see foreign governments controlling or wielding our political power. I think for the first time ever in my life, I'd actually like to see normal people wielding that power that they're supposed to wield in this country.
Yeah. Well, I think when you first said that, my first thought goes to the fact of when I think his name's John Kerry, but when George Bush and John Kerry ran against each other,
Skull and Bones.
they were both
that's where
from the
my mind
same-
went too.
yeah, both from Skull and Bones, secret society. That I think even at the time they hushed it very quickly, but there was time that there was some kind of weird gay ritual that you had to do to be a part of it. That was again falls under that
You had
same
to sit
umbrella.
naked in a coffin while all of your fellow members watched you masturbate and talk about embarrassing sexual experiences. That was the gay ritual I think you're referring to.
Right. Well, I was going to say overall, what you see with all of these rituals, same thing you get with like frat hazing and stuff too. It all falls under what Whitney Webb is deemed as one nation under blackmail, which it seems like this number one tool in the political back offices that gets used is blackmail. It's how can I get someone on tape or on recording or on video of doing something that is just disgusting, degenerate, and would outright annihilate your reputation among everyone that you're around if this were to ever get out. And it's used as like a control mechanism. Obviously, we don't want to talk about the Epstein files, but that's, you know, the same kind of umbrella there. But the same with these secret societies, these super weird ritual where, you know, that video got out of you doing it. I mean, like your life's essentially over, at least in public office, it would be. People would be like, dude, that guy's insane. He's crazy. But I definitely do agree with that as well. More than just foreign influence that definitely kind of controls and has like ties, you know, pulling the strings, if you will, of what goes on in the back office. I think one's just been getting a lot more mainstream than the others, which is why you kind of see the current push you do now, especially with all of elements that have kind of evolved from October 7th and the kind of way it was kind of forced into the mainstream with just how kind of overtly relevant those new topics were, especially for like the last year or so.
Yeah, well, we have these little satanic clubs that run our governments and our schools and our churches now, and our media, our music and film industries. Like, and we have so many Christians that want to turn everybody into monks. And I'm a warrior. I've always been a warrior. I'm never going to be a monk. And you know, the second coming of Christ isn't a peaceful one, right? It's for war. So why are we turning all our warriors into monks?
Right. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in the middle of a war.
That's for real.
And what's crazy is that specific quote, not that specific one. There's a few different altered versions of that. But I remember this happened like 24 hours ago. Elon Musk had quoted someone who posted an image of like a quote that was similar to that, right? It's like, it's better that the night something something than the night something something. It's like same saying, but just a different way of saying it. And people were going after Elon Musk. They're like, wow, how could you say something? How would you promote violence like that? And it's like, what? It's like, you know, you're being purposefully dense to kind of, you know, obfuscate what he's really saying and just be like, look, there's a knight in this picture from Elon Musk. He wants people to be violent. It's like, no, he's just saying, you know, men do need to be masculine. Men do need to be warriors. They need to actually entertain that, not only just in physicality, but mentality. And I think we're lacking that more than anything. I think there's a lot more men who are physically buff and built than there are men who are mentally wired to be warriors. That kind of the ideal that comes from, for one, living for something greater than yourself. What we hear too often from police and border patrol as well kind of floats in that same lines, which is, well, I was just following orders, or well, I you know, I'll lose my paycheck if I do these things. And that's the definition of what we don't have. It's all very atomized, all in this kind of, you know, individualistic, forgive me, like mindset.
Individualistic, what?
Yeah, Hindu, that's Kash Patel's type of stuff there. But no, it's
we're gonna swear on the yabba dabba doo.
Yeah, on the yabba dabba doo, yeah, whatever that thing was called. I looked at it like 10 times and I couldn't tell you what it's called. It's like the Bagrat Gavit or something like that.
Baba Ganoush.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, real quick, want to let everybody know, if you're watching on my channel or Atlas's channel, the chat is happening for the most part over on the Jar Openers channel. We're trying to consolidate everything down into one in the Jar Openers podcast channel, so you can find that link in the description, I believe. I saw Mad News; they're asking about you in the other chat, so I figured I'd let you guys know. Feel free to go over there if you want to be a part of the main chat. Same thing with you, Tix. See, you're on Atlas's channel, so it seems like most everybody else is on the Jar Openers chat. Just letting you guys know so you're not missing out.
Perfect. Make sure you smash that like button as well.
Yeah, of course.
Subscribe to that channel if you're not already.
Yeah, 100%. Please. I saw a couple new faces in here. Who was that? Chat's moving fast on my end, but Sam Clinton Network. Appreciate you saying that you love the content and our takes on stuff. And also Anonymous said we need to deal with lobbyists, super PAC donors, omnibus bills, congressional trading, and term limits. All valid. I 100% agree on all those takes. But appreciate you guys for being here. If you wouldn't mind considering going over to the Jar Openers channel there.
Yeah, well, I was going to say now would be a good time to break into some of the topics that we have. We have some pretty big ones for today. I know you wanted to talk about the top of the hour news that we got regarding the JFK files, which actually happened like a couple hours ago, right? Donald Trump announcing that we will get over 80,000 unredacted documents from the JFK files supposedly tomorrow. I kind of joked even before we went live, or maybe it was live, we're working with Pam Bondi and Cash Patel's time scale. That's going to 24 hours to them is about 4 weeks and counting for us. So I hope they would come through with the promise. I would imagine that they're going to have to, if Trump's putting his mouth behind it too. He must have seen at least it's ready to be presented to people. But I just hope we don't get that same kind of workaround where it's republished, regurgitated information we all already have kind of gathered since that time. And it's been 50 years, 60 years since that incident happened. And I hope we don't get another weird kind of gay influencer dance party with phase 2 binders of JFK stuff, really only meant to send people to these influencers that they want to promote to look at things behind a paywall. Like, that's really what I hope we're not going to get with this. So I have higher hopes. It's one of the issues we were promised to get, and Donald Trump put his name behind it. So we better get him tomorrow.
Yeah. If we don't get them tomorrow, this is going to really tarnish their promises for tomorrow, right? To say the least.
They're not looking so good on some of these promises, though. Remember that whole no wars thing? No new wars. We're stopping the old ones. We're not starting new ones.
Oh yeah.
Was that a promise?
Yeah. Well, Trump likes to talk about peace through strength. I think he even mentioned it in a recent post there on his Truth Social, like within the last couple of days. So he's not wavering on that, but I don't know. We'll just have to see what comes of these Iranian Yemen scenario that you got going on.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah. But let's first off, let me play this. I'm going to play this clip from Donald Trump talking about. Says this is from Charlie Kirk. Breaking: President Trump announces that 80,000 documents on the assassination of JFK will be released tomorrow, as organized and coordinated by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. President Trump has asked that the files not be redacted. Okay, so he's saying let her rip, and this is, something that people have been waiting decades, half a century, for, right? And so they got to deliver on this one. But let's hear what Trump has to say. Hold, let me get that volume. You can't hear nothing.
I was going to say crank that.
All right, I'm turning it up to 11, so plug your ears.
But while we're here, I thought it would be appropriate. We are tomorrow announcing and giving all of the Kennedy files. So people have been waiting for decades for this, and I've instructed my people that are responsible, lots of different people, put together by Tulsi Gabbard, and that's going to be released tomorrow. We have a tremendous amount of paper. You've got a lot of reading. I don't believe we're going to redact anything. I said, just don't redact. You can't redact. But we're going to be releasing the JFK files, and that would be tomorrow. Do you have anything else to add to that, Carolyn? So that's a big announcement. They've been waiting for that for decades. Then I said during the campaign I'd do it, and I'm a man of my word. So tomorrow you have the JFK files. What time will they be released? Tomorrow afternoon, okay?
Have you seen what's in the files?
I've heard about them.
Was there,
It's going to be very interesting.
was there an executive summary supplied to the president?
No, I'm not doing summaries. You'll write your own summaries. It's many pages. Is it 80,000 pages? Approximately 80,000 pages. So it's a lot of stuff. And you'll make your own determination.
All right.
So we'll see, right? Kind of funny that he's asking somebody, to tell him for him, right? And what time is that going to get released? And how many pages is it? So maybe that is a way if something doesn't drop tomorrow. He's like, well, whoever that lady was, she lied to me.
Well, I think he was asking Tulsi Gabbard. Maybe it wasn't Tulsi, but I did find that interesting that he's, first of all, this shot is terrible. The sun is on the side of his face. Like, you got to get better lighting. You're making him look terrible, right? But second of all, he said that he hasn't read them. There is not going to be any summaries. And he kind of seems to be separating himself a little bit other than just making this announcement from the release itself. He didn't know what time, like you mentioned. I think that's something that they should have hammered down. Been like, look, at 1:00 p.m. Eastern time is going to be released. I don't know what needs to be done between now and the announcement, and then maybe they're leaving themselves a little bit of wiggle room just in case a lawsuit pops up or something like that. But I'm pretty sure pretty much everybody that was involved or whatever back then is probably not living anymore. So they really don't have much to protect. I mean, I know people are around people are still alive that when that happened, but just
Right.
saying, like,
Well, I
Not
think
not
also-
individuals maybe, but organizations could be seriously damaged still.
right. And so maybe there's going to be something that pops up. I don't know. Maybe they're leaving themselves a little bit of wiggle room just in case. But I would have felt a lot better about that announcement had they said, 1:00 tomorrow Eastern time or whatever time, right? I mean, 7:00 in the evening or whatever. But
Well, they also knew if Pam Bondi came out here and did it one more time, people would have a heyday.
that's true. That's true. And so let's not involve anybody else. Let's not have Tulsi do it, even though she's like, I think he said she's the one that, or Charlie Kirk mentioned that Tulsi Gabbard is the director of national intelligence, and this is all coordinated and organized by her. So I don't know.
Right.
You're gonna make us mad at all the women in the cabinet this quick, or they're gonna actually deliver this time? And I'm still holding out hope. Right. This kind of turns into the underlying theme is we're holding out hope. We're being patient, giving them the benefit of the doubt, but there's no way they can't deliver something legit tomorrow and save face after that. I mean, nobody's going to believe anybody from the administration, even if Donald Trump says it himself, if we don't get some good information tomorrow. You know what I mean? Something, breaking news that basically shatters the system, the narrative that we've been told. Like, I don't want 80,000 pages to just confirm that it was one shooter and it was Lee Harvey Oswald and everything that we already know, right?
Yeah. And who
I don't-
really was Jack Ruby, and why was Jack Ruby there, and what's his real name, and that's the kind of stuff I'm hoping that we actually get a bit more about, right? The motivations to kill JFK. Why was he specifically targeted? What was JFK doing at that time that
Right.
would have led to a politically motivated assassination?
Well,
That's
Donnie
the
alluded
stuff
to it.
that I'm hoping.
Yeah, Donnie alluded to it a little bit earlier, mentioning the secret societies and stuff like that.
Right, exactly. Which nuclear
That
program
and-
is getting ready to take off on the ground?
Yeah.
What got
the other
stolen
thing.
around that time period? Like, those are the things that, like, if that's in there and that's involved and we get that dropped,
I
then
don't
it's like,
see
okay, I
any
think now we're in
way-
a different area.
I don't see any scenario in which they could be honest about these things that they say they're going to release documents for. I just don't see it. We because we know who's involved in these situations, right? Epstein,
Right.
9/11, JFK, MLK.
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
there's no way that they can release this stuff and be honest with it. It would damage their own agenda, their own goals, and the people that they consider their allies.
Right.
Can't do it.
And that's why that's kind of why I think that they're hesitating on this whole Epstein thing, is because the leverage that they have on all these people goes away once it becomes public. And so it's a lot of power to give up.
Well, yeah, and I think I guess I'm naturally moving. I always want to move to that that black pill position. That's the one I hold the most, because I agree with you. If I had to have like an optimistic take, though, I also think, what other way does this go away without having some kind of massive public?
What do you mean? People
PR.
just get bored and move on. They count
I mean,
on
you're-
you to get bored and move on.
I mean, you're
Right.
both right, really, in that instance. It doesn't make the first thing less relevant, but yeah, they do distract with the next news story rather quickly. There was one big
Right.
one that just happened. I can't, for some reason, I'm completely drawing a blank, but
Well, think of the H-1B visa discussion we had, and all of a sudden Elon was like, "Hey, look, they're raping people in the UK," and everyone's like, "Oh yeah,
Mhm.
look, they are."
Oh yeah, look this 15-year-old story that we wanted everybody to address a decade ago. Now we're talking about it because of the H-1Bs. I
Right.
don't know if you remember, but I went pretty hard at Elon for a long time after that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the moment where I kind of lost a lot of, I mean, not even just respect, but what am I supposed to think of this kind of discussion, right? And then seeing so few conservatives even come out and, even be halfway opposed to it, ultimately you kind of realize like now we're afraid. Now we've entertained bringing this guy into the movement who's not even nearly aligned as much as he should be with regular conservative core values. And now this one thing that might threaten his profit model with businesses is now going to be the one thing that continues to be a wedge that keeps people pouring in over and over into these higher positions of illegal immigration. Is overall concerning, right? But I think it's the, you fell for it again award, right? Like, wear
Yeah,
this
but
nice fat badge.
all right. So the H-1B thing, definitely a factor, but also uh, the fake gaming thing. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's
Right.
super telling, and I think a lot of people overlook that because it seems really silly. But knowing that the richest man in the world is willing to get that petty, so anonymous people on the internet think he's the best gamer in the world, is fucking alarming. It's super concerning. It's
right.
System creating
possibly
fame.
more concerning than his leftist political ideologies because most of us already knew he held those, right? Most of us didn't know he was such a petulant child that he would play somebody to play games for him and then try and convince everybody he's the world's best gamer. Like
Right.
that's that's a concerning use of power from the world's richest man because
Yeah.
it's so petty.
I
Yeah,
think,
so petty. Such a weird thing to like. Nobody
yeah,
expects him to even have time to play. I think it was what Diablo or Diablo 2 or
yeah,
something.
It was Path of Exile too.
Okay, I can't remember what
Yep.
it was, but yeah, it's
yeah.
like
Well, and
who.
I have an experience with those games that I'm not taking somebody else's word for it. I watched him play the games, and
Well,
I'm familiar enough with the games to know that you cannot play like him and be one of the top 10 players in the world. I
Well,
just know that. And
is it
that's
one of
not
those
even
games where you
factoring.
can pay to advance? Is he just buying
No,
everything?
what
he's
he's
getting boosted.
done, in my opinion, what he's done was he hired a team to boost the character, and then
Mhm.
he borrows that character to play on his streams. There's I doubt it's even a one person thing. I imagine he hired a team of people to rotate play this character for him. But
24/7.
then he jumps on his streams to pretend that it's his character, but you can watch him play, and if you know how the game works, you know that he's inexperienced at best.
Ah,
Not even close to
Right.
top 10. He's not even that good.
so when you actually watch him actually stream from his own stuff, you're like, he's playing like a noob. He's not. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Well, think about what he did in the aftermath, though. I mean, he took Asmongold's verification check, a gaming streamer who also called out the same BS in the middle of that wave where all these other people were getting their verification badges removed. Laura Loomer had her subscriptions pulled along with a few other people as well. And now we're seeing the guy who we set out to believe, he himself posted, if the speech is legal, or as long as the speech is not illegal, it will remain on this platform, right? Like that's what like his commitment was. And now because people were ratioing him in his comments, boom, I'll see ya. What there goes your verification, man. Don't come at the king. And then same thing with the video game stuff. Now the video game thing was even more of that petulant child that Donnie had said. Like you're gonna go after this literal guy people call him a roach, right? He lives in this
Steve,
old
right.
house. He doesn't care about his stuff, but he calls you out about this, and now it's gone, right? He can't even. He loses his profit, and like what he's paying for on Twitter because you didn't like that he was highlighting on his, popular channel that you were a liar, and so I think a lot of people kind of felt bamboozled, for lack of better words, rug pulled. This guy
Hoodwinked.
all about free speech. At a moment's notice, if it's about him, the rules don't apply no more.
But it's not just Elon though, right? Because the whole right wing was running on let's get things back to normal and restore free speech. And then as soon as Trump's in office, they're criminalizing anti-Semitism. And Atlas knows this about me, but World, you might not. If you tell me I can't talk about something or do something, I'm gonna fucking do it, and I'm gonna do it a lot.
Right.
Loud.
Very loudly. I've got a big loud mouth and I'm not afraid of confrontation. So um,
Right.
yeah, the more they tell me, hey, don't criticize Israel, the more I think, what are these guys up to that I'm not allowed to say it? Nobody cares if I criticize anyone else. They certainly don't care. In fact, it's encouraged if you criticize America in your own country. But like the more they tell me, you can't talk about this here, I'm going to be the one person left talking about it, if that's what it comes to.
Well, the Streisand effect is undefeated, and it always will be, especially as long as we retain at least this, not complete freedom is what it once was in this country, but some level of it. People have access and ability to find things. Do they so choose to put in the effort to go around Google and the AdSense and that whole kind of mainstream effect? But I totally agree. I think I always refer to the Harrison Smith bit. It was like the 20-second clip he put out because it's hilarious, right? Because he's, as an InfoWars host, is moving even to the right of where Alex Jones and Owen Schroyer are, where he says it's kind of getting tiring now at this point, where the right is like free speech, absolutely, like all the way free speech absolutism. We've got tired of being canceled by the institutional left, except he's talking about Israel. And then if you go and it's like there's a very overtly and very transparent one thing that the right has this very pain point of. And so it's like it's getting, people say it's too the noticing, right? The great noticing. But people at this point who have been fighting for free speech absolutism, same way that in the earlier days in 2008, all the anti-war people, or like as soon as we started bombing, striking, they were nowhere to be found. But now all the free speech absolutist warriors are looking around. And they're like, yeah, free speech no matter what, man. Who cares what country it is? They look to the right. The same guys who were, promoting all that stuff 8 months ago are like, yeah, no, but here's why we actually shouldn't do that and why it's actually hate speech. It's like, whoa, you're taking the same exact position of the people you decried the last 8 years for over what they were doing institutionally and the grounds they had for saying, for one, the moment that you critique something, it's like, wow, you hate that? It's like, dude, me asking a question about something is not a sign that I hate it. The same way when I go, why are they teaching this stuff about gender ideology? They're like, whoa, why are you obsessed with grown man genitals? It's like, dude, if we're doing this kind of conclusion jumping and smearing on this stuff the same way the left did, it's like, what makes you any different? It's just two different things that you care about.
Well, and you get all the grifters making these disingenuous arguments about, what about Burma? Well, it's Qatar. Like, okay, well, when the government starts saying we're gonna throw you in jail for having a negative opinion about the Burmese, you'll have me on a podcast somewhere screaming "fuck the Burmese," But that's not what's happening.
Right.
I don't need to hate on Qatar because Qatar isn't illegal to hate on. I can just hate those people. I don't know shit about them really, but
right.
The fact that I'm allowed to hate them makes me not hate them so much.
Right.
True.
Well, I mean, to me, it was the mind-blowing thing of the fact of what happened with North Dakota. North Dakota, in the middle of nowhere, for seemingly no reason, passed a hate speech law. Their version of the HR 6090, which is like, dude, there's like, for one, there's like barely 1 million people in North Dakota, and of that 1 million people, maybe 78 of them are Israeli or Jewish. Like, who passed this law? Where did the support of this come from? And who lobbied? I mean, it's just like, to me, it's like things like that also flow in the same direction of what you see on a national level as well. It's kind of hard to just be like, why is this happening? And why is it the same people who are pushing for it? Especially when it's the same people who got up in arms about how YouTube was banning and censoring people. But here's this one thing I actually agree for censorship for. It's like, really? And I think for a lot of people, the more you obfuscate stuff, the more you hide from actually having these full-fledged discussions and debates, the more that you churn the energy for when someone sees it and they're 14 years old and they go, oh yeah, these people, this must be these same people who do all these things, and they do kind of buy into that whole argument of these people must be the ones that control the world and do all this stuff, because no one's willing to have the open discussion about it, or even halfway entertain that there may be critiques available to them. And we just can't even have that conversation. So it will default into either, oh, anyone who's doing that must be deranged and obsessed about it, or they fall into the pack on the right side, which is, oh no, these people are protecting them and they're evil, and this is why they're doing it. And so there's no way to have the discussion. And anytime someone even tries, right, they're smeared or they're pushed out. And ultimately, a lot of these things in some countries, it's illegal to talk about now, and it's seemingly approaching that way here in America. Being able to question everything to its full extent. It seems like some of that's approaching here.
Well, it's not even just questioning, right? It's like quoting the Bible, right? I can't even just come on here and be like, oh, I hate Jews, and they're like, oh, that's anti-Semitic. I also can't quote certain parts of the Bible, or that's anti-Semitic. I can't say Christ is king, or that's anti-Semitic. They're trying to make it illegal to talk about Jesus in their country, but for some reason in my country, it's illegal to talk about them.
Yeah,
Wild.
that is wild.
Right. And these are the people that ran on like free speech that are criminalizing this kind of speech. You know, a year ago, it was no speech is hate speech. And now they're like, oh, well, anti-Semitism is hate speech. And they're not even Semites.
Right.
They're all Eastern European communists. You know, like the leader of that country has a fake name. He's from fucking Poland. You know, they're not Semites. That's why you can't share DNA results there, because the people that they're genociding, those people are Semites. Yeah. So
Right.
it's a big mess, man.
Right. Well, this is one of those things, right, where you it has to be walked upon eggshells. Even if you do like a lot of due diligence and you do something like Candace Owens, right? You put together a long, huge production, a lot of thousands of dollars go into your production. You do research to present things. You still get smeared and drug by the powers that be, seemingly always in the same direction as well. Even happening to people like Dave Smith, Clint Russell. Now, a lot more of the libertarian voices recently, especially when regards to what's happening with the U.S. getting involved with Yemen and bombing them. Now Trump is now with those strikes has killed multiple women and children. It's something that we always held in high regard leading up to 2020. No new wars, right? The president does everything for not wanting to do all this stuff, and here we are. We're a couple months in, and now we're bombing Yemen, and then also now in the same breath holding Iran accountable for anything that this group does. And then now we're trying to hold this moral standpoint of, well, you guys are helping and abetting and funding these rebel groups. And it's like, you realize at some point America just simply has no ground or leg to stand on, when for the last 80 years, all we have done with our intelligence agencies is dump and spend money and fund multiple different rebel groups to destabilize different areas. Like, we are the world police. It's like, there's no moral high ground there. The question is, why do we think and feel that we should be justified or there in the first place? And I think then a lot of libertarians who are anti-war are just like, dude, we're 2 months in. We're not getting the files we were promised. We're going to war with countries that we shouldn't even be involved with, that all have, again, a link similar to what we had just talked about. And third, where's the mass deportations? And so now it's like, we're not getting anything. We're seemingly we're getting everything that Miriam Adelson would be doing if she was president. That seems to be like what we're getting. And that's the unfortunate reality of, I think you're going to lose a lot of momentum, unfortunately, in the period where we need to get as much done as possible. Specifically in the first 2 years, while we know exactly what the numbers are and how the seats are sat in the Senate. You let things go out of bounds like that, it's like, well, you're going to begin to lose control.
Well, and they always create some narrative. Like I see people talking in the chats about shipping lanes and stuff like that. Realistically speaking, I haven't seen any proof of that. It's always some desert dirt farmer, right, that's doing some dastardly thing that we have to blow them and all their family up for. But you see all the dirt farmers die, but you never really see, oh, this is the thing that they did that we're killing them for. You're just told about it.
Right. Well, the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq,
Exactly.
we didn't find, but what we ended up doing was taking over the poppy fields. We had, with like U.S. Army military controlled, like 60% of the world's production in poppy fields, which 90% of the world's production supposedly goes to like big pharma. So it's like,
well, and the person
illegal
pointing us in the direction to say, hey, blow up these dirt farmers are they do this every time. They say, oh, it's a terrorist state, that's why we're blowing up. They're doing terrorist things. Benjamin Milikowski, is that how you pronounce his real name? I'm not using his fake name, I'm using his real name. That guy is a war criminal. He's a war criminal saying blow up those terrorists. Like, why are we listening to that guy? Like he's running a terrorist state, saying, "Oh, but those are the terrorist states that are your problem."
Are you talking about
But
the
they're
same
not.
guy who actually did bring up to Congress the weapons of mass destruction in the first place?
I think so.
Mhm.
Right. And
You know,
and that's what it is, right? And I think what probably bothers me the most about this is someone could have listened to the last, like, 20 minutes or so we've been talking about this, and what seemingly some of their takeaways will be is, so why do you love jihad? What, do you want America to be Muslim? It's like, dude, what are you talking about? It's like nothing I said was pro-Islam. I think that's also a pretty flawed way of life and religion there. I'm just saying, can't you tell that one of them is clearly backed in the good thing to be doing, the politically backed trademark? This is the right opinion. Like, yeah, we hate sand people, but seemingly any other opposition to that, or any kind of halfway of like, hey, like maybe America like shouldn't be involved in this for like X, Y, and Z. You're like, whoa. It's an entirely different take to it, and that's what I can't stand. It's the obfuscation, right, and the smearing of any halfway protection of some other peoples, especially when it's Islam, or an Islam primary prominent nation. Is like, do you just love Muslims? No, I care about my country, and it's like, why do I have to pick a side between the random country in Middle East? How about we not there in the first place? Have you
right.
ever thought about not being a stormtrooper for the Empire once? Like, do you not desire for a day where we can just realize America cares about its own citizens, and we're not sending a bajillion dollars to some person in Pakistan to do gender studies, or like, and like what Donnie had said earlier, right? It's, they bring up Burma or Qatar, and it's like, that's insane, because when did we do $1 billion arms deal with Burma? It was right, we didn't. We're clearly involved with one of these countries way more than the other. So that's why it has the extra kind of weight to it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
well, and put into that lens, like that my opinion is we share more in beliefs and values with Muslims.
As
If you
Christians, yeah.
are forced to pick a side as a Christian, you share more in common with Muslims. So this whole Judeo-Christian bullshit needs to stop. And the whole idea that Muslims are on their own flooding Western civilization without any kind of push. I don't think that's true. I think what's happening is, if in big cities, if you bug bomb a building, all those roaches just march to the next building. And
Right.
I don't, not that I'm necessarily comparing them to roaches. I'm just saying, as the analogy, that's what's happening. Is
Yep.
Israel bug bombed these buildings, and now all of these people are trying to find a new home somewhere else. So I mean, you have that, but you also have like the basics, right? Like Muslims respect Jesus Christ. He's one of the most quoted prophets in their holy book, Quran. Very much the opposite with Judaism. They think he's burning in excrement in hell, and they like to spit on us. It's part of their tradition, to spit on Christians. So I think in certain countries in Europe, it was very easy to rile them up and point them at Muslim people, because Muslim people were under their nose as the problem, but they weren't looking about, why are these Muslim people here? Like, why
Right.
are they here and not where they should be?
Right. Well, this actually stems into a whole other discussion, which I think will probably be a discussion we'll enter into first as a nation as well. But it is the actual reality of race, the race realism aspect. I think too much and too quickly have we been pushed with multiculturalism. This idea that we're all square pegs with blue shells, and we can all do and interoperate the same way, and we're all entirely replaceable. It doesn't matter what the skin color is, or the genetics, or anything like that. And I adamantly entirely disagree. I think that there's a civic way that God ordained things to be. You go to with Stone Choir's argument there, which is the three sons of Noah who would have embarked off the boat would have been Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and then each one of those represent a third of humanity, and from there, then all the different races began to flourish. Or rather, one of them was cursed, ultimately from a sin that he committed against his father. But then you also look at just the reality we live in. And everyone has these experiences, but it seems like no matter where you are, on what planet, on what show, it's taboo to say it. it's taboo to say, actually, no, I do realize that like people tend to aggregate based on race and creed and religion, almost kind of like in that order as well. There's certain kind of what's the right word? Immutable characteristics that kind of precede that, and those environments take that place. You see it in the reality of people who don't assimilate in this country. I think even if you didn't have the overwhelming kind of influence of anti-America voices that said, who cares? You can be whatever you want. Bring your culture to America. Down with America culture. We want to import more yours. Even without that, it would still naturally have some kind of breakup there where people would begin to separate into what they're most comfortable with. And I think the longer that we kind of deny that, we kind of force these things into the populace that aren't theirs, the more you're going to see kind of escalated violence. Some cities are very unlivable. And no matter what you do, people still move out of those areas, right? They don't want to, they just would rather be able to associate amongst their own. But promoting that in a form of, well, I'd rather just be around, like for myself, right? If I was just say, well, I'd rather just be around white people, they take that as like, oh, you must hate every other, you must, with every ounce in your body, you must despise every other race. And it's like, no, it's like I just have a preference of what I would rather be around when it comes to just like the way of life, the way of speaking, everything. You could just a very basic kind of preference. But we've reached that point where the opposite of that is that kind of nationalism, that localization has to be opposed, and you must be smeared as a racist. The UK is getting it a lot worse than us, though, and I think they're going to reach a breaking point too. You can only have so many under the age of 12 white daughters getting raped in your country before people are going to begin to fight that off.
Right.
Isn't it wild how if you say every country belongs to those whose ancestors built that country, if you say that, that's racism? Because that's all nationalism is. I'm not saying, hey, let's make a white ethno state in Japan. Right? No, I'm saying they get their country, I get my country, you get your country. And somehow that's racism.
Right. Right. Well, I think it's funny because Joe Rogan even brought this up. He's been getting attacked relentlessly since he's been saying these things, like with I believe it was with the Martyr Made podcast. But he brings that up, that exact point, which is no one cares when it's like China's like, we want to retain our Chinese, keep things very China based. Where Japan is like, yeah, we kind of want to be a bit more isolationist. We'd like to retain a lot of our culture. We'd prefer to, to keep our culture Japanese. And then when America's like, I think we want to retain, our white Western values, all of our European major influences. They're like, whoa, did you just commit a hate genocide? It's that's the kind of dichotomy that there is. And it's very noticeable because it does come to like one race in particular. And I had listened to a black nationalist on the Jake Shields podcast, and forgive me because I can't remember his name. And he brought up a couple of things that I'd never thought about personally. But one of them in particular, though, that kind of caught me off guard was the fact of when it's for an individual such as myself, and I've talked about this on my solo channel too, being inundated over and over with advertising, and mainly advertising, but you see it elsewhere too, the constant promotion of like interracial relationships, but it seemingly only goes one way. He brought up the fact that for him and his community with his targeted ads, he gets advertisements that are white men with black women, and that what most white people don't think about is the fact that they're targeting all the races to have this kind of divisive nature, right? To break apart their people's willingness to kind of retain inside the race. And that's one thing I'd never thought about, was I'd always thought it actually ran one way. No matter who was watching the ads, they're getting the same one.
No, and I would argue that black people were far more susceptible to the brainwashing that was developed for them than we were for the brainwashing that was developed for us. I mean, even just look at all the 90s, early 2000s gangster rappers that are all fucking homosexuals.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like these are all the people that influenced black culture into being, you're hardcore and gangster and criminal in nature. They weren't like that before.
No, they're all feminism or feminine, homosexuals that like were just used to basically trick. I mean,
Tupac was a ballerina.
Right.
He went to a fucking art school. He was in a movie where he played a character called Bishop, and then he never stopped playing that character.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, and
And then
then
all of them are fucking each other except for 50 Cent, who I'm pretty sure is fucking legit. You can't really fake getting shot 9 times. That's real gangster shit. But other than that, they're all fucking each other.
Right.
yeah, yeah,
They're
it's
all on the
Never in the
down
club.
low.
right.
Yep.
Like, and again,
And that
the black
influenced
community was more susceptible to the brainwashing that was developed to destroy their communities.
and that influenced an entire generation, not just black folks. I mean, I love the gangster rap coming out in the 90s, 80s, 90s, era or whatever. That's when I was a teenager and growing up. And
I mean, I was always into punk rock music, but like I had friends that listened to that stuff. I listened to some of those albums,
like I've always
I
liked
like some of the
everything.
music.
Like I've
Right.
always liked everything for the most part.
Yeah,
But
Richard
I mean,
Nitron.
I've
Me
had,
too. I like all kinds of music, but I have a home,
yeah,
Like I go visit other places, but I definitely have a home, and it's
right.
a home where people do not appreciate my kind, at all. I go to concerts and they're like, "Oh, I know we all wish we could kill all the right wingers," and my poor wife just looks at me like, "Are we in trouble?" Like, no, we're fine. Like, it's fine, but like the
Right.
but the destruction of the communities was for everybody. It definitely wasn't just for white people, and I think there's a lot of white people, and they notice the shit that's aimed towards them. But again, I don't even think we were hit. We were hit hardest.
Right.
Well,
You're
with
right
that,
about that.
I think one thing that I'd found out, maybe people don't know this too in chat, what led to the fatherless epidemic, one of the root causes of the fatherless epidemic in the beginning of the black community, was, as best described by this black nationalist, was the fact that when they had implemented things like the food stamps and the welfare support system, they had actually required that you must be a mother who lives alone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is that the Jim Crow era? I believe it was the Jim Crow era, which was a pivotal point in breaking up the black family as well.
Right. And this was like the beginning of the program. And what they did too, was it was right after, and I can't remember the specific incident,
They
but it
made
was
black
right
women
after,
marry the state, essentially.
Yeah.
right. And it was right after a large layoff of a company, or two companies rather, that employed a lot of black men. And I can't remember what the companies were at the time, but they laid off all of these black workers. And then immediately right after that, this was getting proposed. And so he was talking about how a lot of guys back in the day had to like live around that schedule, and they would actually come out to the homes and visit to make sure like only one person was there. There was only like the mother and just the children. And so this began and like kicked off a lot of what we saw with the fatherless homes, where in that era you couldn't even fault it, because if a man can't get a job, he can't even provide for his family. But the way that they can get money is if he's not in the home. So these guys were like just leaving the house when they needed to, right? And then that began this kind of trend of the black woman marrying the state and being dependent on that, and like, I don't need no man. And it was all largely propped by the fact that the government was funding, like they were subsidizing fatherless homes.
Right.
And for the only reason that you can expect, I mean, even at that time, if you want to put like a racist label on it, was to obviously destroy black families. Now,
Yeah.
they would
Well, when
look
our
at
friend-
that.
I was just going to add to that just real quick. When our friend Dirty Money came on, he was saying that he has friends who literally excuse themselves from the family for just that reason, to say that she's better off without me, and use it as an excuse. Maybe that's a cop out of they don't want to be there in the first place. I can't judge that person's heart, but he says that he knows people literally in that community that were excusing themselves from the family for their kids so that they could get these extra benefits from the government.
Right.
Which is 100%, confirming what you're saying right there, which is the incentivization of black women to, be single and be a single mother. Not only that,
Right.
The way that society has moved in the culture, it's a big thing now to be a victim, to play the victim society, and all that. You know what I mean? Like everybody, when they're telling a story, there's some type of victimhood to it, where they're a single mom or just whatever, right? And it's always included. And so, yeah,
I
once
work
society
in
rewards that stuff, they go for it. Anybody.
So I work in academia, and they do all these kinds of it's leftist space, right? It's academia, so they do all these kinds of like DEI progressive trainings and shit, and I did one on intersectionality. And do you know anything about intersectionality as an ideology?
Yeah.
It's basically the government approved racism. And in this
Right.
training that me and all of my colleagues have to take, it talks about, well, you might have a different identity due to your race or your sexuality, and certain identities give you more power than others. That's how it
Right.
was worded, right? So
Mhm.
they spun this narrative of we're trying to defeat racism, but they're not. They're just trying to change how it works and who benefits.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, this leads into the social contagion aspect of having
Role
like a
reversal.
hierarchy, which is why you see what seemingly is a lot of men looking at things and going, I can't compete on this playing field. I have to be gay to get that extra added status to be able to be more on the preferred candidacy, right? It adds me like that's my little emblem that says, I'm diverse. Like, at least I'm not a straight white male, right? It's like it's one kind of block you get to walk away from, like what seems to be the most targeted demographic in all of America, at least the last couple of years. And now it's moving past that, right? It seems that Christianity in general is also it's well been under attack, but seemingly it's getting ramped up, especially when you have the help of con Yankee gatekeepers who help kind of provide and prepare the correct opinions for people who still follow them. And I think a lot of people kind of see through that, and that's why you see people who leave companies like the Daily Wire, Candace Owens, triple their view count, and outperform Ben Shapiro, because I think a lot of people are witness to this. They're kind of getting that idea through to them. It's kind of hard not to when you do have free speech platforms like X, where you can go and see everyone else what they're talking about it in the public purview. But not to keep it too limited on this, I think it's a great discussion we're having. Wanted to go to the fact that big news story that we got recently that does have some political play is the fact that Trump had truth a few times in a row talking about how he is going to be voiding, or he's at least announcing himself that he's voiding these pardons from Joe Biden, particularly because of the story we talked about previously, which was the Autopen debacle. Everything and every document Joe Biden has signed was done via Autopen, except for his withdrawal from the 2024 candidacy for president. And that raises a lot of legal questions with just how valid these are. I think people were bringing up the fact of the LNG, right, with the liquid natural gas executive order that he apparently had no idea had been signed, and then reversed, I believe, a day or two later, after it was brought to his attention that he had supposedly signed this executive order. And so I think hopefully what we will get, and I think Elmo had said this earlier, they already pulled the Secret Service protection from Hunter Biden and Ashley Biden. But I'm hoping we're going to begin to see now an open to investigation for Fauci, Adam Kinzinger, what's her name, Shaney's daughter.
I'd be open to keeping Secret Service for Ashley Biden, just so we keep her dad out of her showers. But other than that, I approve of all that.
Right. But ultimately, I'm glad to see it. I think this is like what we had said earlier. They were able to look just within a quick little bit of metadata that these Autopen signatures were being signed while Joe Biden was nowhere near the White House, nowhere near even one of these devices to sign something into law like that. And so I think that raises a question like, can someone sign an executive order that's not the president? I think the answer is no.
Right. Well, I've used things these programs like DocuSign and some of these other ones pretty regularly, right? And it's a valid, legit, automated signature, right? You sign it once, or you just you type your name, it does a cursive version of your name, and then that's your signature. You can do this from your phone, you can do it from your computer. That's assuming that Joe Biden knows how to use a smartphone, which I'd argue most people Joe Biden's age aren't that technologically inclined to do it from their phone. But I don't want to discount the potential that he did use a cell phone to do this. But nevertheless, the argument is still valid. Right. It's one of those things where the Autopen in the presidential executive office, is it ever really necessary? You live in the White House, you travel to your home like in Mar-a-Lago, or like for Biden, he was going home to Delaware to hang out on the beach and look old and scruffy and
Eat ice cream and shower with his daughter. And,
right,
you know,
exactly.
presidential shit.
Stumble upstairs on the way and fall off bikes and basically be completely inadequate, like top to bottom the whole way. So not that I would say that, but I mean, somebody could also, like his wife, I think she was facilitating a lot of this stuff. And I don't like making the excuse for Biden, but like Dr. Jill was obviously, you know, doctor, right? Was obviously
Woman Biden.
wanting to stay in the White House. And I wouldn't be surprised if she wasn't making some of these decisions for Joe. And there is potential that where she was like, here, click this button on the screen, Joe. I got it pulled up for you. Click your name right there. All you got to do is touch the screen. Your signature goes on it, right?
It's probably
But
some intern. I doubt Jill Biden was doing anything. I mean, I agree that she, you know, probably pushed him to stay in the White House, but realistically speaking, it was probably some Obama staffer doing the
right.
auto penning.
Well,
No, you're probably right. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical that is somewhat feasible, right? I think she was more, Jill was more cognitively aware than Joe was. So there's a potential that she was maybe facilitating some of that stuff. But
if you remember, there was the reporting, right, when the calls for Joe Biden to drop out. The reporting, at least I believe from like Loomer and others, was that Joe Biden was pissed.
yeah,
Joe Biden did not appreciate the fact that they're getting pushed out. But I think that would lend itself to the fact that that probably meant that she was probably doing a lot more than what she should have been allowed to be doing on paper.
right.
And so I think that was her idea of like, you're taking away my shadow presidency. And then, you know, ultimately what we got on with the.
Do you think it was her shadow presidency? Because I don't. I think it was Obama's shadow presidency.
I think it's a bit of both.
If I had to pick a 50-50, I would say it was probably Obama, but I wouldn't write off Jill Biden having some type of input decision making in that process. You know what I mean? Like at least
as a handler, maybe, but as a
Right.
shot caller,
because she is the handler, right? She is the one the linchpin between the actual president at the time, which was Joe, and the you know what we're calling the acting president, which was Obama, right?
Yeah.
So she had some type of control in there as a mediator in the middle, but hypothetically, but I don't know. Like the whole thing with the Autopen, just to round it out to my original point, I don't think a president should ever need to use an Autopen. Everything should be available to them in the White House. Yeah, I like the use of technology. Technology makes our life easier, for sure. You know what I mean? My wife being a realtor, dealing with people trying to get loans and buy houses all the time, it saves people hours a day driving to a place to sign a piece of paper when you're trying to close on a house, when you can just pull up the app and click it, right? Like, but for the president, sorry, I have this chicken trying to walk. She has a hurt leg, and so she makes sound when she tries to move. But
that's funny.
But for a president, like I feel like he has access to everything all the time. So there's no use for an Autopen to be, no reason for an Autopen to be used. I mean, you can pick up a pen and sign something if they're doing business from their home, either in Mar-a-Lago or in the White House or in Delaware or the White House. Air Force One should be equipped with all this stuff. The helicopter should be equipped with all this type of stuff, you know, the printer, whatever, and a pen. And so I think that workaround is kind of a cop out almost, like for a shadow government to essentially say this dude's signing this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately what it matters even kind of less about like what's the reason that we can use to void the pardons, but more so matters the fact that these pardons should have never happened in the first place. I don't even care if the president has the ability to do so, especially when it does come to people like those who are on the J6 committee and Fauci in particular. I think when you commit crimes to such a level that has international consequences to it. I ultimately think I don't think a national pardon at the federal level really matters. I think ultimately, even if we were to let that stand, send Fauci over to the ICC, right? Give him to somebody, try him in some kind of court for the crimes against humanity that he committed. No pardon's really going to save him, I think. But ultimately, though, I think when it comes to the Hunter Biden stuff and it comes to the J6 committee, we need the transparency that comes with that. I think we're still kind of sitting here with a limp narrative of what J6 was. You'll still have people in the Rachel Maddow sphere who are screaming at the top of their heads it was this violent, bloody insurrection all carried out by a bunch of racists. We need that kind of disclosure, that kind of closure to the American people, where you get everyone from even MSNBC and CNN that have to say out loud, these are the 27 different federal agents who were there at January 6th. These are the crimes they were committed. This is what they're being investigated for. This is what they did. They shot first into the crowd. They did this, X, Y, and Z. That's what people need to hear overtly and over and over and over again. That kind of stuff, because it's impossible to move and forward as an informed citizen when you're carrying ideas that were disproven 5 years ago, but only if you were listening to the right people. And that's why it matters that you get this kind of transparency out there. And that way we can kind of move forward as a nation that has the ideas. And that way you don't have to listen to some kind of preamble from some deranged leftist about, well, you supported the insurrection on J6. And it's like, well, if we can make that stupid to say out loud, then we'll move away from it and we'll begin to heal and move into a better direction.
Right. I totally agree with that. We need the culture to shift. And that comes, the only way that happens, unfortunately, is with the help of the mainstream media, which we know completely serves the Democrat Party and evil. To go back to what Donny was talking about earlier, these, who's really running things, the secret societies in other countries and things like that. Additionally, lots of money exchanging hands to make sure the right information is repeated and other certain information isn't repeated. We can look at the Twitter files, almost call it the X files. We can look at the Twitter files and know all about the Hunter Biden laptop story, or look at Mark Zuckerberg and what he was told, what he has said, how the government was telling him that there's this potential story that's going to come out that's big that has to do with Biden and his son, and it's all fake news, and they preemptively got out in front of it, like Nancy Pelosi has said, to do in the past, get out in front of a news story, set the narrative, those types of things, right? And so, Elon Musk buying X was a step in the right direction to take X out of the hands of who it was in before. Although Elon still has his, his things we can look at, like we're talking about before. He's still it's still questionable to trust him or whatever, but I think we all can agree that X is at least in better hands now than it was as it's a better platform as X than it was as Twitter. But maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we find out in a couple years that
I never used Twitter. I only tried it once it was X.
Right. Maybe we'll learn in a couple years it was just an all new psyop. I don't know. That still remains to be seen. But for now, it seems like a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking too.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, is there anything more un-American than listening to your government? Like Mark Zuckerberg is really going to be like, "Hey man, please, the government said for me to do this." It's like, really? I think if you have the American patriotic, spirit in your soul, you're going to say the government told me to do what? Screw off, dude. I ain't listening to the government. The fact that you listen to Mark shows that you're more Canadian than anyone in this room right now.
Right, for real.
But that's why, again, it does feel like a psyop when, for the last however many years, you look at Facebook did the censoring and the suppressing of a story that many believe would have been an actual linchpin and how the election would have swung, even with all the other kind of nefarious things surrounding it. And then now we're going to get cozy with him because he shaved his head and did his karate. Like, dude, throw that guy in prison. Like,
hey, you're totally leaving out that he wakeboarded while holding an American flag.
Right.
Let's at least give him some credit. His humanity update that they gave him was better than the previous one.
Right.
He at least looks like he might be a person now.
They just upgraded the robot.
He still needs a booster seat to speak to Congress, but we're making progress.
They downloaded a bunch of comments from Instagram Reels and then uploaded it to him, and he's like, "Why do I feel more Chad. These are my thoughts and feelings now. But that's really how it is, right? Like I'm very far past the party of let's all unify, guys. And it's like I just think back to that same Hyde post where it's like, remember, like when these people are in power, they want you for better or worse, they want you unalive, they want your children's to be raped, and they want your heritage, your tradition, and everything you love and hold dear wiped from the face of the earth.
Well, they want you to live in the pod and eat the bugs and be happy and own nothing. I mean, they've the World Economic Forum leaders have said that for years now. It's been out there for years, literally. Sometime in midway through Trump's first term, and we're talking 4+ years, 5, 6, 7 years, that it's been out there that the end game is for every single person to live in a pod, eat bugs, own nothing, and be happy. And the be happy part comes
Right.
from you're irrelevant, you're fed just enough to not want more, right? I don't know. It's
Well, it's not a Hollywood movie though, right? You don't just like, Stalin just murdered tens of thousands of people, millions of people. You're like, oh man, I was so wrong, guys. Okay. All right. Well, I'll vote next time. We'll let your system play out. Like, that's just not how it works. Like
Right.
when evil is evil, it is like it has to be crushed and met with the right amount of justice. I mean, these things, light has to enter and be shine on the darkness. There is we operate with this kind of half-baked model of like, we'll just bring everyone back to the chessboard, we'll pick the pieces up, we'll play a fair game this time. And it's like, dude, for the last 10 years this person has literally taken that table and thrown it as far as across the room as they can, and they called you a racist, and then they made you pick up the pieces. It's like, how about we stop trying to play a game with these people? We realize that you're trying to instruct a 4-year-old toddler with Down syndrome. That's just not how it's going to work. You're going to have to treat things as they are, kind of like removing this PC, this like last little bit of PC film from the eyes of the American people, and go, you can either treat, the criminals as they should be treated, or you can continue to play this game where you're playing with a liar, a snake, and a thief, and you're going to act as if you're not going to get lied to, robbed, and stabbed in the back.
Right, bit by the snake, right? And the snake's in the end going to tell you what'd you expect? I'm a snake. I know you guys all know that whole story, but I want to read this here and get back to the
Scorpion and frog, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I want to get back to this whole Donald Trump, not Donald Trump, but the Autopen thing. We got this post here from Truth Social from Donald Trump. The pardons that Sleepy Joe Biden gave the unselect committee of potential thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by Autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the unselect committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me, and that was, I think, in regards to the January 6th committee, right? And continuing, and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on their behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of our country, crooked Joe Biden. So, here's Donald Trump saying that they need to be subject to investigation at the highest level. Hopefully his cabinet's listening, and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel with newly enlisted Dan Bongino, who signed on today as the what's it called, the deputy director of the FBI. He signed on today. Hopefully these people get the message from the president and start working on those type of things.
Right.
This is what we elected Donald Trump for. This is the things that he promised us beforehand, and we expect nothing less, right? We said before on the channel that good enough is not gonna cut it. We want the best, and we only have 4 years, potentially only 2 years, depending on how the midterms go, to get this stuff done. So there's no time to waste.
Yeah, we want results, man. We've had a lot of talk. It's been
Right.
a lot of talk, and very few results have come from this, right? they bring up the thing of Pam Bondi, right? It's like 0 files released, 0 politicians investigated, 22 Fox News appearances. It's kind of like the stats we're rolling with, and hopefully we do get a bit more of that.
Right, and I'm so tired of these people running to Fox News.
Right.
Like, nobody watches Fox News unless you're over 65. Like, who are you talking to? Who do you think you're talking to?
I mean, and again, it's without the results, we kind of default back to that whole like, we'll just let bygones be bygones, and there's really not much you can tell somebody who, had to look through a glass window at the last breath of their relative passing because during social distancing measures were in place, they couldn't see someone while they passed. You were kicked out of the military because you didn't take a certain medical procedure, things like that. And then you're like, hey, dude, come on, man. Mark Zuckerberg had said like he liked Trump, dude. Like, we're fine. It's like,
Right.
it's just like, that's not like, that's what I mean by like, that's not good enough, right? It's like, we need more than that. Like, I want to see Mark Zuckerberg, stripped of his human face, and we see the reptile that he is, and he squirms in front of Congress as they actually like look and dive into everything that was involved with him. And he's just one example. I think that needs to be for everybody who was involved. Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, the entirety of the J6 committee, Hunter Biden, everybody, Fauci, everyone who was involved, all of those kind of big name actors that we have. And those are the easy ones to go after. Then you can even break things down and go further after that.
Right. Tix Bomber says here that Joe Biden wasn't the problem. The puppeteers are. And, that just goes to show that, I want to point out that 12 of the last 16 years we've been under a Democrat president, and Joe Biden was not the only one that was groomed. He helped groom Obama, if you remember. Of course, he was the Obama's vice president, but Obama was brought along and catered to as this, I don't know what you would even call it, this white knight of, the next greatest thing, right? I mean, he speaks eloquently. I remember Joe Biden actually insulted him, saying that he's never seen a black guy talk like that, and he's clean or whatever. And then this dude ended up becoming our next president after Trump, just 4 years later. It's just like, Biden and Obama, 12 of the last 16 years has been a groomed, distant president. Like, I don't even know, like we were saying earlier that it's like Obama that was the shadow president, but really Obama was groomed and brought along his whole entire career, right? And then set sail by the people that groomed him to go live in Martha's Vineyard, post the era when the tides were supposed to rise and put Martha's Vineyard under sea level.
They pick puppets that are controllable, right? Like,
right.
Have you ever seen the interview with the guy that was claiming he used to smoke crack and have sex with Obama? I think stuff like that was probably why he was picked. If you have stuff like that in your background, you're easy to control. That's why they love using these pedophile entrapment camps like Epstein and Diddy to blackmail people.
With the blackmail.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, Obama was like the greatest pressure release, I think, president of all time. He fed all these boxes to appease people when, you have, I always forget the name of it. Oh my gosh, not Operation Wall Street. But when you had a lot of these different groups that kind of joined together, they were very anti-war. They were anti all these kind of big establishments. They threw Obama in there, and everyone got to walk away. And they said, they're singing.
Well, I think
my president is black. Like, it was like this massive kind of way of disguising one more time that these two wings are connected to the same bird. But we'll finally entertain and appease those who want a black president, who want more social issues, who want, no more war, peace with Obama. And then he becomes Obama.
Well, I think, didn't Obama pardon somebody that had literally like either tried or blown up some buildings or whatever, like suggesting that these people were actually kind of like running? Who was the guy that, I know he pardoned somebody that was literally like, he was an American, but he was anti something. Oh man, I wish I knew the story better. It's been a long time, but I remember at the time when he pardoned the dude, people were like, dude, you're literally pardoning a guy that's try to attack our own government and our own this and that. It's like, doesn't make any sense. Oh man.
Right, but probably just carrying out a measure of, you know, the globalist elite.
Right. The people that groomed him and put him in position, you know what I mean? This is the same organization that was trying to blow it up, and then they finally got him in there. Weather Underground, you know, House is never failing with the facts.
Oh, that's right. Weather
House is
Underground did
a
all the
very
bomb
clever
shooting.
AI. He's the most based AI that exists.
What is?
House.
Oh yeah, for real.
Yeah, house.ai.
House.ai. Where the base facts live.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you please tell me?
Give me a breakdown of this. Yeah, man.
Well,
Encyclopedia.
here's an uncomfortable fact, though. In your lifetime, do you think that there has been a president that was actually in charge, that ran things? Let's exclude Donald Trump for now.
Bill Ayers. That's exactly who it was. Thank you, House. But to answer your question, Donnie, I would say Trump. You know what I mean? That's maybe Ronald Reagan. Maybe Ronald Reagan.
Oh,
but I was too young to witness the Ronald Reagan
punk.
era.
You're not gonna sit here and talk good about Reagan without getting some pushback.
Well, no, that's the thing. Like, I was in grade school, maybe middle school when Reagan was president. I feel like it was grade school, but he seems like he did a lot of good things. Although I don't like the whole war on drugs that they started against marijuana specifically.
Reagan was awful on social issues,
but he has some good things.
Divorce.
Right. Oh, that's true too. So
I don't think any of them have been in charge.
But I don't know if he was controlled. But he was an actor beforehand, and
and he got into his presidency under some shady conditions with the hostages.
But I would say I think Donald Trump is the only one that's not controlled. I think that's why they hate him, and I think that's why they try so hard to oppose him, and try so hard to infiltrate his circles. You know what I mean? I think if he wasn't one of them, they would use him. You know what I mean? Think of the power that he has with yeah, no shit. Like, think of the power that he wields with MAGA. You know what I mean? And if they could control him, they could.
MAGA went soft. MAGA's not holding people accountable in the way that I'd like them to.
Right. There's a big portion of it, that's for sure. But I think we're the kind of the exception, right? We're the the Christian nationalist wing, essentially, where
I'm not MAGA.
Where okay, well, yeah, that's fine.
I voted for the guy, but I never identified with that group.
Right. I mean, I don't even know if I have my channel is called America First, but I don't know,
America First
really where the distinction between MAGA, America First, or Trump supporter really is where the lines are drawn. But I can tell you, I do agree that there is some type of cultish following behind Trump. We saw that with the Q thing the first time around. People were
it's still going on.
Well, it's still probably going on.
Still people that believe in Q,
this whole wait and see, things are happening. Wait and see, things are happening. It gave people reason to not do anything. It gave people reason to wait and okay, it's happening. They're doing it. And
and
there's
now
this other faction of it that just real quick. There's this other faction of it that, a lot of the Christian base part of it, they're so pro-Israel, even to the detriment of their own country. And I'm not talking about the religion over there. I'm talking about just the country, the funding, things like that, right? And they've confused praying for Jerusalem, which is what it says in the Bible, with fund Israel at all costs. And that's unfortunately, I think, the majority of the Christian base that follows.
Thou shalt send missiles to Israel. Like,
right.
Tim Hyde segment kills me every time.
I disagree. I don't think in our entire lifetime there's been one president that actually ran things.
Not
I
even
think they're
George
figureheads. Well, in my lifetime,
Oh, okay, fair.
maybe even before my lifetime, but because we were talking about Reagan, which I guess we'll throw in there, but I don't think any of them were. I had high hopes and optimism for Donald Trump, but I also had an understanding that even if he got out of line, at least the right would throw a fit about it, right? They'd
Right.
push back. They would try and hold their leaders accountable because we're not a cult. But
Right.
then he got elected and he said, men have a penis and women have a vagina, and MAGA are still celebrating that win and not worried about, okay, but the party of free speech and no wars is limiting my free speech and starting new wars on behalf of people that have done us wrong historically. I don't think I think they're all figureheads. And I mean, Trump, I wanted to see good things, but he's owned just like any other president, in my opinion.
Well, who would you think would be the one that controlling Trump? Because he's not a member of a secret society. He's,
Well, they
you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think his hands are tied. I think the reality is that if he wouldn't have won this presidency, he would have felt full weight of what it would have meant to actually been sent in prison over all these charges, whether it was a document case or whether it would have been any of the other kind of BS cases, the Stormy Daniels case, that he needed to win. And in order to win massive lawsuits like that, you need a lot of money. And ultimately, he was only getting small donations from people. That was until he received an insane infusion of cash from Miriam Adelson.
That's what House just said too.
Who has a massive right. And so Adelson, I mean, that is playing a huge role into it, right? And I think the total tally count from pro-Zionist organizations, he's received over $230 million in just the last, I believe, 8 months from those kind of organizations. And I think his hands are a little tied to that. In fact, if he didn't get all that money, who knows, would he have been able to help pay off all these lawsuits, right? Or what he would have to sell down, or what he would have been up against. And so ultimately he's kind of, he's tied to the hand that feeds him, rather. Maybe it's not so as close as it is a humiliation ritual. Seemingly it's enough that he's tied into it financially, right? That he may have ultimately been, his mugshot may have been the last picture we would have got of him had he not received massive amounts of cash and that kind of fear element. But that's where I think his loyalties lie. I think he is in this pro-Zion group. There was reporting even in 2019 that he had actually joined the Lubavitch. He had converted to Judaism and joined the Lubavitch. And it's in New York. I can't remember what the full name of it. House would know this too.
House knows everything. He's AI.
Right. But that's exactly what I believe has happened. And I think that there's some other ties, if you follow Jared Kushner as well, a few other things that would raise suspicions, because again, like I always say, the river flows one direction. Now it'd be one thing if it was like, oh, this guy had a WEF tie, and then his one son has this one tie to this one country over here. It's not
his whole
it's
family, it's his whole administration too. He basically, the entire administration is a Zionist administration. They might be Christian Zionists, but arguably they're the worst kind, in my opinion. But I mean, I think it's easy to say, well, his hands are tied, he's got to do what he's got to do. But if I wasn't right in saying that he's not in control, he's the president of the United States of America. He's supposed to be the most powerful person in the world. If his hands are tied, somebody tied him,
Right.
And I think it's obvious who I think it is. It's donors, it's Israel money, and stuff like that. But I think it's a cop out to say, his hands are tied. He has to criminalize anti-Semitism. He has to, keep giving Israel their money, even though he's just trying to halt all foreign expenditures like that, except for them. I think it's easy to say his hands are tied, but when you see his family ties, the people that he stalked in his administration, the push for this new world order globalism, like let's just start absorbing Canada and Greenland and the UK. These are all things I know the right wing would have fought against if the left had done it. But now a lot of my friends on the right are saying, hey, well, He said men have a penis and women have a vagina. What more do you need?
Duh.
Right.
Well, okay, but I've always
Right.
been against the new world order, and that doesn't change just because he knows
Right.
the shit that my children know.
Well,
Right.
listen,
Well,
I
I've
mean,
argued. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, you know, you're talking to the guy who you yourself
I
convinced
know.
to vote for, because leading up to the election, I was out. I was
Mhm.
like, I'm not gonna vote. Like, I was with the far dissident crowd, right? I was with the whole like, too many of these things are making me think this is a Trojan horse administration that's going to come in. I have a lot of, especially when it comes to things like abortion, very like core conservative principles. TPUSA keeps marching out a bunch of homosexual men as if they're conservative. And it was like, to me, it was like, I can't willingly vote for something that's like not even just representative of me, but something that I think is going to hold the door open for not only more of this kind of liberal 2012 centric idealism to take place, but also, in that same breath, holding the door open for the exit for anyone who was Christian conservative to leave as well. And that's, and then ultimately, though, you know, pragmatic sense, obviously, I think there are on the margins still reasons why Trump would have definitely been better than Kamala Harris, period. Only outside of the frame of accelerationism, right? Because that was the kind of the viewpoint I was at, where, well, if you vote for Kamala, the whole thing burns down and we can just start over, right? That kind of speeds along this failing empire of what America is. That's why it's very specific that we do get the fact of some results, right? We get
Right.
some
We
actual,
need some results for sure. But I think that Trump has been backed into a corner. I mean, we're talking 8 years of attacks, 9 years of attacks. They shot him in the head. They've tried to impeach him. They've raided his house. They've gone through all of their personal things. They went through his wife's panty drawer. They went through his young son, the teenager son's bedroom. You know, and they've kind of left him nowhere to go, especially when it comes to like donors and stuff like that. So when Miriam Adelson, for example, comes to him and says, "Hey, look, we're gonna back you," that doesn't necessarily mean that he's owned by her. That just means that everything else is dried up around him, right? And he needed money to run. Yeah, he might have some IOUs on the other end of it, but I'm kind of with TNT here and saying where he says that we're not even 60 days in.
I'm reading.
And we're saying that the Jews own him. And I don't believe that's true. Because, I mean, even in his first 4 years, he was accused of being an anti-Semite himself. We had to make the excuse for Trump that, look, man, you guys are attacking him saying that he's an anti-Semite, but his grandchildren are Jewish. Like, we had to point it out. Like, so it's one of those things where rich people definitely control and run the world. But I think Trump is one of the if I had to pick of any of the presidents in my lifetime who was the least bought and owned, it's definitely Donald Trump, right? I mean, the dude was the reason why they go after him is because he's clean. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do drugs. He didn't participate in their parties of debauchery. So they've always seen him as an outsider, even before he was a politician. He was the dude that was looking at them and judging them, and they all knew that they were doing evil things. And whenever he got the opportunity, he went ahead and locked up Jeffrey Epstein. You know what I'm saying? So, like, this is the dude that's never been a part of their group. He's always been exiled by them.
These are all people that loved him before he started.
Well, everybody loved Donald. Everybody loved Donald Trump. If he walked into a restaurant, he'd get a standing ovation. I've seen it.
Well, so here, let me kind of address the people talking in the chat. This is my thing, right? You build an administration for what you want to accomplish, right? You get a good idea of what he wants to accomplish in his administration just from who he appointed. Now, in my estimation, there was a bunch of promises he said was going to happen day one. It's not happening. I get stuff takes time. People in the chat saying, well, just give it time, give it time. I guarantee in a year, these people will be saying the same thing. Give it time, right? But now is when to hold these people's feet to the fire, right? The reason I convinced Atlas to vote for Donald Trump, even though we were both a little shady on some of the things that were going on at the time, was because I genuinely believed the right would hold their leaders accountable in a way that the left cannot, right? And what that means is when your promises are broken, you say some shit about it, right?
Mhm.
You make sure that they hear that you're upset about it. When they start criminalizing free speech because it's about their allies, that's when you hold their feet to the fire. You don't wait until they're 3 years into the presidency to start doing that. You start doing it now, right now, so
Right. Well,
that
I mean,
you
but
get
when
what you
Trump was,
actually want.
well, yeah, I mean,
Right.
to that, when after Trump had won the election, but he wasn't inaugurated yet, and he was floating cabinet appointees, he did go back on one of his cabinet appointees' suggestions, simply because of the public backlash on X that was like, no, we can't have this dude at this position. And then Trump took the dude off the list. So, I mean, there is an aspect of him listening to the people and being accountable. And I don't know. I feel like, but like they said, it's only been 60 days. He has got a lot done. He's spoke to the press more than Obama and Biden put together, pretty much in their whole entire careers in these first 60 days. He's listening to the people. He's talking to the people. He's engaging. He's out there posting on X and True Social all the time, trying to be transparent. It's just the one thing that I would critique the most out of it is he needs to quit listening to the left. But the to your point though, he did appoint former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat, RFK Jr., former Democrat Elon Musk to head up Doge, which that's not a cabinet position. I get that. And it's like, is there really nobody else in the Republican Party or this MAGA movement that you can't use in these positions? Like, I do question that, but then that's more of an indictment on the party itself rather than the man, because the one guy that did stand out to me was Matt Gaetz, and he felt the full weight of the opposition that Trump has felt, short of being shot in the head.
Right. Well, with that one in particular, I've always held the position that if he wanted Matt Gaetz to be AG, he would have held recess appointments. He would have sent them away and he said, we're not even going to worry about regular confirmations. Matt Gaetz is my guy and he's getting in there.
Yeah. I mean, I wish he would have done that. I think that was partially Matt Gaetz' decision to back out. And I think he just took the money and ran for the money. He talked about money multiple times, but just me mentioned that Trump pardoned all the J6ers. That was a huge issue.
Yeah.
That's been something that
what I'm concerned about is that he does just enough good to satisfy the base and then ushers in this globalist new world order.
Yeah, we definitely got to be careful about that.
He's doing some good, but when he strays from the path, everybody says, well, net positive, right? Net positive. I'm over net positive. I want what I was promised, and I don't mind rocking the boat a little to make my opinions on that heard. And I think that you can do a little bit of good and a whole lot of bad at the same time. And I think everybody wants to focus on the good because we desperately need it. But I'm trying to be a realist, right? Like, if we want them to do what they said they're going to do, we need to hold their feet to the fire the whole time to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to wait until a year and a half in and say, you know what, he's still not doing the things that he said we'd do. Now let's start trying to hold him accountable. It's too late.
No, that's why we critique him so heavily. And it almost, I just caution that we don't critique so heavily that we become anti, right? Because we ultimately, to me, Donald Trump is the team that I'm rooting for, right? And yes, like for the Chiefs, for example, right? I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm a Royals fan. Look, I got a Royals hat on, right? The Royals have historically been known for being terrible, and anytime they were terrible, they're hiring a new coach every other year, right? And nobody knew who the best coach was. But the thing is, it was always my team that I rooted for, but yet I still reserve the right to critique the coach when we're doing terrible. We have to be cautious in this.
Lose?
But
we have to be cautious in this analogy to make sure that we don't sound like we're a Raiders fan because we're critiquing the Chiefs, right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So we just have to be cautious of that, because I don't want to
Why are
send
you
the message
fans
that
of
Trump.
politicians? Why are you a fan of any of these people?
Well, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm really a fan of anybody.
You're on their team. You're a fan. The problem is when you start being on a politician's team, they get your power for free. They
Oh,
don't need
Evil
to do
Elmo's
shit
bringing up
for
old
you.
shit.
You're their fan. You're on their team. They can fuck up all they want, and they know that they'll still get your vote. That's why Democrats came into power, is because Democrats are on their politicians' team. I'm not on anybody's team except my family, my nation,
Oh,
my
you're right about that.
I I I voted for Donald Trump. I talked Atlas into voting for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I talked everybody I know into voting for Donald Trump, but he doesn't get my power for free. I'm not
No,
on
no.
his team no matter what he does. And like you brought up with the Chiefs, if you're a diehard Chiefs fan, you probably let a lot of suckage go. You know what I mean? Like you probably like, yeah, they suck, but you know, I grew up watching them. I've got this loyalty for them. I don't think people should have that kind of loyalty for their politicians. I don't think people should have it for their sports teams either, but that's a
Right.
different argument.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're right about that. But what I was talking about, how I was using that analogy was that we can critique the coach for making a bad decision. We can critique the ownership for losing, and demand that they fire the coach, demand that they get a better players, whatever it is, but still be a fan, but still be on that side. And I just want to make sure that in the critique, we don't come off like we're some Trump hating Democrats, because that's definitely not what I am.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Well,
I'm not trying to
right,
like come down hard on Trump to where people are like, oh yeah. And then I realize half the chat is a bunch of Democrats rooting us on. And it's like, wait a minute, how the fuck did we
Well,
get here? Like,
I think, well, there's a couple of things in there. One, I will point out the comment from Dirty Money. To disagree, you definitely hold your own team accountable if you want to win. And that's the same way I am, right, with the Chargers fan. Dude, we could be 3 seconds into the first quarter. Justin Herbert throws an incomplete pass. I'm like,
yeah, that's why we critique.
I'm like,
because we
get
want
him out
to
of there.
win.
Dude. Fire that guy. And it's like, you know, everyone's like, oh, come on. It's like one play's been made. It's like, yeah, I get that. But you want to demand greatness from the people that you root for, especially the ones you lend your energy to.
Right. That's why we critique them, because we want them to win. We want them to do good. That's, you know what I mean? It's if
Right.
we're just in it for watching the game, like then you don't really have an opinion. That's kind of why so many people shouldn't be allowed to vote, is because they just don't have enough invested in it in the first place. They're just watching and rooting or whatever, but they don't really know anything.
Well, I think why we're in a very unique position in history. I think for the first time ever, a true kind of he's like, I mean, Donald Trump, by any stretch of the imagination of anything that meant Republican 100 years ago, he's not. I think ultimately we're in a position where he is an actual kind of true centrist politician. And we got that by the fact of conservatives had to practice big tent conservatism because they were losing so badly in the culture war. They had to start reaching out and compromising on core values to be able to blow the program back up, to be able to oppose what was a very progressive-led, wild Democrat party. And so that's why I think we're getting to a unique period where Donald Trump's in the center. I mean, anti-Trump rhetoric can be from the right just as much as it is from the left. The left will probably follow it from, TDS syndrome as well. But the right's going to come from the principles that are being left behind, the people who he is putting the interest ahead of the American individuals, as well as a few other things. But that's why, I think if you look at this from another angle, I mean, look at the politician who he most recently went after, which is Thomas Massie.
Yeah, that was a bad call.
A very bad call. And he's going after what is probably the most explicitly principled individual in politics outside of Ron Paul. I mean, that's a flag on the play, dude. Like who was in that guy's ear when he made these truth posts? If that by itself, even if we got everything else we were promised, that alone by itself was enough to question who is in this man's ear and how far away are they from what the American people want out of their politicians? Because Thomas Massie is beloved. I mean, overnight we saw people go, Massie 2028, because it was like
I was one of those
this
people.
guy. Right. Well, so am I. And I think that's a matter of that's the difference between a cult of personality and being a fan of a politician versus wanting principles, regardless of like the good and the bad, right? Holding the principle. And we're talking about the guy who engineered a debt clock badge that's hooked up to the national debt, and it can tell you any point in time. It's a nice little device that he made. And you're calling into that guy's principles when it has been overtly over time. He has shown you the one thing that he cares about is getting rid of the national debt and finding a way to get us out of the spending mess. And when you see the posts like that coming out of nowhere, just because he won't march lock and step with Donald Trump because of what Donald Trump wants to do, which in fact would have been bad with the continuing resolution and the boost to spending that we're putting forward. That's what Thomas Massie pointed out. And then for 20, not even like, what was it, like 2 or 3 days later, the bill gets passed regardless, with like 26 Republicans joining the Democrats to pass this massive spending bill. It's the point of, you have to hold politicians accountable no matter who they are, how much you like them. It's a matter of like, you want to be your best interest represented. And that's why, I've always held that position. Why I was even, reluctant to vote for him in the first place, was because I'd always felt in the back of my mind, like, I don't know if he's going to be, well, take that back. I know he's not going to be a Christian nationalist. That's not what he is. I don't expect him to be that. But I can at least expect him to not be a whinging, whore, light-skinned diversity candidate who's going to come in and, for one, be a woman of all things, but also, that be the commander-in-chief. It's like, okay, there's clearly a better choice here. But ultimately, when you call your fans to attack somebody and you get that backlash, right, where people immediately were like, yeah, if you're going to force me to pick between Trump and Massie, definitely Massie.
All day, every day.
And I think that's why you see that immediately out of the news cycle, is because people made it clear online, like, you're not the what's the right word for that? You're not the beloved boy, right? When it comes to Massie, people will definitely choose Massie over Trump. And that's because by nature, Massie has been in the politician ground for a lot longer. And he's also a lot more of a true red-blooded conservative. And he represents a lot more of those kind of more true libertarian conservative Christian values and principles. And that's ultimately what people want, right? Trump's kind of like the stop to what we've been seeing, because we want to move beyond that. We want to stop all this craziness. He's a great big tent conservative position, or big tent conservative kind of politician. But we want that in place because we want to get away from where we're at currently and move down the line, get the ball down the field, and just staying with football terms there.
Yep.
I think it's wild, right? This is a political channel, right? We're all into politics in one way or another. Mm-hmm. Anybody that has kept up with politics for any amount of time should know that you do not trust politicians, right? There's jokes that go back 50 years about not trusting politicians, but I come up here and I say, hey, I don't trust politicians, and everybody's in the chat saying, hey, you trust my politician. This is the one to trust. Like, are they going to tell you to trust lawyers next? There are certain people that you don't trust because their job is to lie to you, right? Their job is to manipulate you. I don't trust any of these people.
I didn't. Right? Yeah.
But I would say the counter to this is to that, because that is a very true statement, is that Trump really isn't a politician. He's a New York businessman that in his late 70s decided to do what he thought was best for the country that he loves. You essentially be a politician. But once you're 70, I would argue that once you're 70, in your 70s, you're not going to change the man, right? Donald Trump is a New York businessman, and that's who he is. Like, just because in his 70s he decides that he's going to run for politics, run for president specifically, he didn't play the politician game. He didn't work his way through fundraising to keep his job in Congress or anything like that. He simply put his name on a ballot, and the first time he ran, he took
money from lobbies. We discussed that, right?
But the first time he ran, he paid for his own security. That's the thing, and that comes with it, because especially now in this era, the first time around, I don't know if he took much money because he funded his own security. He traveled around on his own dime doing all this stuff.
He refused the paycheck.
Right, but this time he kind of had to, because what is the Democrat? What is the opposition done to him? They've tried to drain his bank account. They've tried to, throw him in jail.
Oh no,
multiple
that was a
times.
plus that he refused the salary. I thought that was a classic move.
Right. He refused his
That
salary the
wasn't
first time. I
appreciated.
assume he's doing the same thing this time. They backed him into the corner where his only way to move forward was with the people that were willing to work with him.
He had to play politics.
And so he had to play politics. So he's more of a politician now in this round than he was before. But still, he's 70 years a New York businessman in real estate and building stuff. I mean, like, you're not really going to change the dude a whole lot. He's smarter at playing the game. He compares it to cards when he was talking to Zelensky and stuff like that. He's like, you don't hold the cards to Zelensky. So, I mean, he's playing the game. Hopefully he hasn't forgot about his base, right? You know what I mean? And ultimately, I'm still holding out hope. But no, I don't trust a politician. But if I were to trust
try
one,
and convince yourself that he isn't one either.
right?
I know
if I were to trust one more than another,
politics. But as soon as you start taking lobbyist money and holding office, you're a politician.
Right, but he doesn't need to do that. He just did it. He just did it to win the presidency again, right? He doesn't need to do that. I mean, the response to his first 4 years was they kicked him off of X and everything else, trying to shut him up. He went and started his own social media, and then he ended up injecting like what $3-4 billion into his bank account off of Truth Social and the SPAC that, just this last year. I mean, it was an all-time backfire for somebody trying to ruin somebody. For an entity trying to ruin somebody, right. But he's motivated too. Like, these people tried to kill him. These people have tried to throw him in jail. They've invaded his house. Like, you got to think that part of Donald Trump, businessman New Yorker, is saying, "Fuck these assholes. I'm going to win again, and I'm going to get whatever I can get out of this situation." You know what I mean? And so right. There's a lot of layers to what's going on, and obviously he knows a lot more about the details with the release of the Epstein files and things like that than we do. Which is funny because sometimes he'll throw these little ideas out there and people will call him stupid for it or whatever. Like, specifically from the Democrats, I think of the bleach thing that they always like to throw out there. And it's like, actually, have you ever considered that he's the president and people were coming at him with, hey, this is a potential treatment. This is a potential treatment. And then he just floats it out there as an idea. You know what I mean? And then, of course, they conflate it to, he said inject bleach. And then it basically gets a mind of its own.
Right. Well, I think ultimately the point though does stand. How much can you trust somebody you never met? I mean, you can trust that he'll do things in his ego, like what you had said, right? Like ensuring, even if it was a New York Democrat, right? Like, I'm going to win just because despite these people. And you can trust Donald Trump to do that, I think, at least in a little bit, right? Some of that personality is never going to change. But I think it does revolve back to what we had said earlier, which is the fact of the second time around, he did have to play politics a lot more.
Right. Can Donald Trump be bought? I don't know. Like, the dude has more money than a lot of people on this planet.
It's not always about being bought, right? Because you got to imagine that paying somebody out isn't the only way that these shadow powers operate, right? You've got to imagine there's threats involved, there's other things involved other than just being paid off.
Well, yeah, they've tried to kill him.
Well, I think
they tried to throw him in jail. There's been he literally got shot. There's been other assassination attempts that we know were foiled. He was minutes away from being shot on the golf course by the other guy. Yeah.
Well, that's why I think that's why it plays into the fact of it wasn't even a matter of like choosing to run for president this old age. It was more so like you have all of that weighing down on you now. It's like now you have to run for president. Yes. It's like not even a matter how much you want to run for president. It's like, if I don't make this run for president, what happens if I lose in court? And now I am looking at a 15-year, felony charge on documents that now I'm not going to have anyone in power, no administration to help fight off. It's going to be all of Kamala's people coming in, and they'll just bury me even further if they're allowed to retain in power. That's why I think there's a measure of like, I don't buy too much into the whole, look at him running the second time around. We didn't have to. I think he was more in a position of like, he must, because if he doesn't, someone else gets into power like Kamala, they will jail him. They will go after his kids. They'll go after Kushner, go after Eric. They'll go after Donald Trump Jr. And so I think there's a level of like, even if it's not an explicit threat, I think the implicit idea there is that if you don't retain power, they'll use that same power and beat you over the head with it.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. The one case, the judge, or not the judge, the district attorney that was bringing the charges. They dropped the charges, but what's the phrase? With prejudice or without prejudice. They worded it to where they can revisit the charges after Trump's 4 years are up. So I mean, he's still going to be looking at some of these charges on the state level, unless I can't remember if that particular case was a federal charge, which he should pardon himself in the end for all the federal charges. So there's a bit of self-preservation in there with that as well. But
I think a lot of Republicans have this idea in their head that there's good guys and bad guys, right? And I think life is always more complicated than that. I'm not anti-Trump, but I don't think there's this faction of good guys and bad guys. I think it's two factions of shit people fighting over power of Americans who are supposed to be the ones wielding the power, right? And when you assign yourself to a politician's team, they get your power for free, which is a problem. You should make them earn that power, right? And they earn it with these promises. And, you know, everybody knows that politicians make promises they don't keep. And I'm not saying you should immediately abandon any kind of loyalty to somebody that's done good for you. But I do think, especially when it comes to America just starting to absorb the rest of the world, we need to be very cautious with anybody that is trying to do that, because it doesn't end well, right? The WEF, like we talked about, they want you to live in pods and eat bugs.
Yeah.
So if there's a new world order, it's not like everybody's going to get free speech and Second Amendment rights. We're all going to live in pods and eat bugs.
Right.
That's what the globalist government is going to be.
Can I have 10 minutes of the sun today?
For real.
So I don't want you to think like I'm anti-Trump and I hate Trump and I don't think he's done any good. He's being the best president in my lifetime, not a high bar. It's a pretty low bar. So I'll admit he passed that bar, but we need to demand just so much of a higher standard from these kinds of people. And we need to remember, even when a politician is on our side, they're still a politician.
Right. Well, you know, I think to your point, the fact that we're able to have this conversation and entertain the concept that Donald Trump might actually listen to the people, that we can hold this higher, that we can hold him to a higher standard, even being a possibility, is, you know,
that's huge.
It's huge, because there's no way Kamala Harris or any of these Democrats that we've seen over the past 16 years would listen to the American people like Donald Trump has, at least. You know what I mean? So
well, and that's why
that is an important factor to.
It is huge, and like I said, the left wouldn't have challenged their leadership, and their leadership wouldn't have listened. So either way, he was the better option, but he was the better option because we can actually hold him accountable.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he listens.
And the reason why it's not
quality.
like left wing either is because I'm also not sitting here being like, impeach Donald Trump, like now he needs to get out of office. Like no one's saying that either. It's it's like we're at the stage where we're promised some things, we're not getting them. It's like I literally don't care how golden your toilet is, brother.
Right.
We need these Mexicans deported out of this country.
Right.
We need more Bibles in the schools. The DOE needs abolished. Like all these things, right? It's like we need more. We need more. Because the other argument is like, why would you not demand more? Well, I mean, if the best we can do is like, well, at least our president's not dead and being propped up, like, you know, we can Bernie's. It's like that, you know, that can't be where we kind of rest our laurels. We're like, oh, at least he's alive and breathing.
At least he's not being babysat by the Easter Bunny, as TNT said in the chat. Well, and like, I don't know if you saw this, but Andrea mentioned she's pretty sure I would have been a problem no matter who got elected. Facts. I'm going to be a problem from any politician that I don't think is serving the American people in the way that I'd like, and none of them serve the American people in the way that I'd like. So that is a fact. I'd be sitting here shitting on any administration, and thank God we all understand two genders again, but that isn't the only goal that we should have.
Right. That's I mean,
I love that we do.
From 1,000 years ago, right?
I want to start I think we abandon Republicans and we start the party of gay retards, and then we actually get what we want, right? And
Yeah, well,
that's a great name too, because they know no political correctness here already. I think that's a
right.
great selling point.
I'm the chairman of of GNR.
Yeah, GNR,
Which is
GNR
great letter.
Incorporated.
That's Guns N' Roses in my era.
Right. Well, and
I
I
always
think
forget
that's
how old you are. You look like you look like my age,
that's
but
funny. Well, I think that's a point to be had there. And I think that's something, I made a lot of what I talked about on my channel specifically about I saw the cracks in the wall leading up to this election. The right's not going to be able to hold together. It's unsustainable. You can't on one side have TPUSA that's like, you can be as gay as you want. Like you're here, well, you're conservative. And then people to the far right of that saying like, dude, like I want my country to be not this homosexual. Like I want Christian values back in. And
Yeah.
so those are kind of like the little cracks that are kind of coming to a head right here, which is we got our guy in. Now the time is to argue. We unified to get the guy in. Now
Right.
the time is to argue about what needs to be done moving forward.
Right.
Because we're in charge now, right? What the Democrats do doesn't even matter. Like they're not in power right now.
Right.
What matters is we're wrestling. You have a dissident right group wrestling with a normie group, also paired with like a bunch of neocon, and we're all wrestling for like what the direction is for what we can do with this administration. And I think it's to be expected. You're never going to, especially when you do that big of a big tent conservatism, you're never going to get a unifying voice out of that. You're going to get constant infighting of people who are trying to pull the influence the way that they can. And it's a good thing that we got here, because if he didn't win, we'd all X wouldn't even be here, right? We'd all be shoved into corners,
Right.
and I'd be painted as a Nazi, and I'd have a guy knocking on my door, taking my daughter away because someone called me a Nazi on the internet.
Right.
That's
Because
what
you refuse to entertain transing your infant daughter.
Right, exactly. And that's what we avoided, right? We avoided the extreme dystopic, but now we're on the next level of okay,
Right.
level 1's passed. Level 2 is, again, it's provision. It's no more of this reactionary stuff, because the reaction is to people who are in power. We're in power. So we're the ones who need to be proactive. What are we going to do now? What are we going to set in place that we get rid of some of this activist judge stuff? What are we going to do that's going to get rid of the DOE ever implementing some gay, how to be trans stuff for 8-year-olds in schools ever again? What are we, all of that stuff, right? Coming out and being super, super based, right? And being extremely like, you know what, we're doing this, this, and this. But there's also hesitation there. And I think it's where the dissident right comes from mainly, which is they never expected Trump to be the avatar of Christian nationalism. So that's
Right.
why you're seeing that group in particular be a lot more vocal, because they're trying to fight tooth and nail while they have the chance of being allowed to speak in public for the first time, albeit behind anonymous profiles for the most part, because their desire to normalize their ideas and thoughts is like comes like a ravenous hunger. And it's like, this is our chance to do it. This is our chance to go mainstream. We tip the scales. We become that vocal minority who shapes the normal kind of paradigm in the future. And I think that's kind of the situation we're at right now.
Right. And going back to like the whole, sports kind of analogy, this isn't discrediting all the achievements that Trump has got done. This is simply winning a game on Sunday, celebrating it on Sunday night, back to business on Monday, on to the next game next Sunday, right? And so we're not going to sit here and wave our flags of victory because Trump finally declared, which is so stupid to even say, that there's only 2 genders, right? We're not going to sit here and wave our flags of victory because of all the pardons that we agree with, and amongst the other things that Trump has already got done, right? Like, it's important to note and remember, because that's what your record is, right? When you win, then you get your record. You're 10-1 or you're 1-10, right? And right now, I think Trump is, winning more than he's losing as far as record goes. But as soon as he gets these wins, like tomorrow, if we get these JFK files, that's a win. We'll celebrate it. We'll talk about it for a couple days or a week, and then immediately, even before, like if it lasts a week, we're already going to be on to the next game. We'll take the win, we add it to our record, and we move on, right? And that's kind of how I see it, right? And
I'm not stopping. Everybody's got to wear a swastika on a red armband.
Trump is at a fast pace, and so we're gonna move at the fast pace along with him. And we've celebrated the Kash Patel FBI appointee. You know, we've celebrated some of these things, but nothing's as important as the next thing, right? And the next thing, and the next thing, or more important than the last. So I think that's something to just keep in mind, right? And we don't want to become too negative, worrying about. At least I think, right? We don't want to worry about the few things that we're not getting yet. We
Right.
do still have plenty of time for the files to drop. We do still have plenty of time to get these deportations escalated, which every day they're not going full bore. Just means they're going to have to average more per day after that,
Right.
you know. But at
Well, I
the
think that
same time, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we can't see. What Andrea mentioned earlier when I used the NFL analogy, we watch the games, we watch the draft, but we don't know what's going on in the coaching rooms. We don't know what's going on
No,
in the higher levels.
No, what's happening is they're playing a chess game for the soul of America, right? And we get a say, but we don't get to see the table. And everybody saying, "Oh, trust that they are playing in a way that represents us and that they're playing in our best interest." That's wild. We can't see the table, right? I'm going to use what power I have, even though I can't see what's happening in the game. And even if that power is just critiquing the things that aren't being delivered.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of great that can come from a lot of what he's done. And I saw somebody mention in the chat that it's not just the two genders thing, and it's not. There's a lot of good. I'm not going to sit here and say everything, but again, if he does a little bit of good and then ushers in a new world order with some kind of globalist regime of Swiss bankers running our country, that does not work for us in the long term.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
But
I
you
think
know, and I agree. But I will say, if Trump can take a little bit of ground back, that'll be the first time anybody's taken any ground against Democrats ever, right? At least in my lifetime. And so it's a step in the right direction. Hopefully it's a big step and not a small step, you know, I mean, but I do agree with just me here. It says, I've got to say, I'm feeling pretty victorious. It's an amazing feeling, completely the opposite of what I was feeling during Biden when he was president. No joke. And
Wow.
I do agree with that.
Well, I
Well,
was just going to say too, I think overwhelmingly, kind of like there is with, you know, this expectation of like with things like with violence, for example, and people are like, oh no, like why are they doing that? And it's like, because it's forced doctrine, and that's just the way things inevitably take place. The same way I would say it's like you can't be shocked that when, you know, someone's not doing, like, if, like, for example, if you were doing something and I was like, hey, I disagree with that, like, I don't appreciate you doing that, and you're like, I don't care, I do appreciate you doing that, I'm going to do it anyways. Well, then why would you can't then expect the person who you're not obviously aligned with to just go along with it and be like, you know what, dude, I literally don't care about my values at all. You do whatever you want in there, man. That's like also where we're at too. So when you have, again, a repeated kind of era of something's not aligning there, right? And I said that I'm full force. I knew I was in the minority when I first started my YouTube channel. Like I'm and now even further along that too. I'm a Christian nationalist. So I know there's a huge base in the MAGA party who doesn't want to have anything close to like any amount of like modesty moderation for like women's clothing. That's like an avenue they'd never even go into, right? They're too attached to their swimsuit calendars, and that's fun. It's America. You can do what you want. But if the power was in my hands and I was aligned with people who I was aligned with, I would be getting rid of those things. And so the further we move to the right and what Donald Trump is doing becomes the norm, they're going to have people who are on the other side of that there as well. And they're going to push for the things that they want, right? And then that's when there's a room for the disagreement. And so to expect that we were always going to forever carry this purely reactionary movement that's MAGA anywhere for a long period of time is just, that's never how it was going to be. You were uniting too many different alliances to oppose the great enemy, which was like these insane progressive Democrats who just overplayed their hand at the end of the day. And if we return back to normalcy, you're going to see the return of people who are very far to the right of where a lot of the MAGA group is, pushing for the things that they want to see, which would be on the lines of like abortion and homosexuality, transgenderism, social culture at large, obscenity laws, things like that, that a lot of the more kind of liberal-minded MAGA, just to the right of center individuals don't agree with at all. And so to expect that there's not going to be a period of time when the rubber is going to meet the road on those issues, it's just like not looking at it from like a realistic sense. It's like, how long do you think people will just sit here and just repetitively want the 2012 liberal ideals when a large portion of your base is evangelical Christians who want to see a lot more Christianity in their country? So it's kind of an inevitable path we're on. So you should expect that there will be continued infighting, and the right's always infight a lot more than the left because we're not so much of a monolith.
It's good for you.
Ideas.
Yeah, true. And the left definitely falls in line, and if they don't, they get kicked out. And that's how we get so many disaffected liberals that come over here and end up, where they are.
Steering the ship is where they are. That I disagree with. I don't know why we accepted all these people in and gave them any kind of like say in what happens. Too many leftists in the administration, I think.
Yeah.
In the base too.
Well, as a whole, right? I think the administration reflects the people who voted for him too.
I think ultimately Trump's not the one that's going to bring Christian nationalism to the forefront. You know what I mean?
I don't think we expect him to.
Right.
I expect a lot from him, but not that.
That's going to be done in the culture war, and like what we're doing, what Andrew Wilson is doing, folks like that are having these discussions where we can affect the mindset of individuals, young people coming up, and to have this more Christian-based life authority, that type of stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it'll take time, and maybe we're looking at Massie 2028, maybe we're looking at Vance 2028, but maybe over these next 12 years, hopefully we can retain, Trump for 4, Vance or Massie for the next 8. We can continue moving in that direction unobstructed by Democrat leaderships that do nothing but take ground. And over that time, we're going to have a lot of the folks that are on the Republican deep state kind of side of things. The Mitch McConnells of the world are going to age out and retire. So we're going to see a huge,
hopefully.
Yeah, we're going to see a huge shift in this next, 4 to 8, 12-year period. So it's really important right now. It's a pivotal moment for Christianity to have the revival that we need to avoid the next crusades, essentially. the next
avoid
battle.
them. Why are we avoiding them? Let's get some.
Well, if we
can work in already.
If we can do it through diplomacy, then we obviously should try. But you know what I mean. And it looks like the playing field is setting up for the opportunity in the future. You never know. We'll have to always, be aware and be alert and play it by ear. But I know the younger generation is more susceptible to Christianity and things like that. They're more willing to hear it. And for a long time, it wasn't cool to be a Christian, and I think that's changing. So I see it with the youth at my church and some of this stuff, and it's real encouraging. So.
Right. Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of things that play into that too. But ultimately, I think when you look at the 25 and under men in the world that they have to look at and seeing, for lack of better words, they're graders, they're superiors. The old men that are older than them carry themselves in ways that they find, reprehensible, even as young kids. Yeah, it's inevitable. You're going to get, like this with the Crusades, right? Like they are inevitable at this point. You can see the surge momentum. Now it matters, is it going to happen in the political sense as we would like it to be? Or is it going to take form in terms of like resistance, or will people start to get violent because they get very tired of living in this extreme kind of degenerate society? I guess
that's part of it. I think that's a big part of it. These guys are going to grow up and be like, yo, there's nothing wrong with me. Why can't I find a wife? I just want to have a wife. Culture has made life so fucking hard and so stupid that I can't compete legitimately for a wife. Like, you know what I mean? That's
right. Well, I think even on this end, we're having a bit of that too. But I think ultimately what's even worse than that is from an even younger age, when men are inundated with OnlyFans content and everything else that is pornographic, as well as all these Houthi, 7 IQ,
Well, the AI sex robots and all the crap that's going to be coming out over the next few years as well. Like Elon Musk is
Right.
talking about, less than 5 years, there's going to be AI sex robots. He mentioned on Joe Rogan. I mean,
Right. Well, when you have a populace of men who look at women and they say, why would I even want that in the first place?
well, that's
I mean,
yeah,
that's what's going to be the most radicalizing. It's like, it's not even a matter of like, oh, I have a hard time competing. It's like, why would I do all of this just to get a wife who's fat, lazy, dumb, or for a lot of men, what matters is like, this one's been ran through. The sexual revolution has been destructive. Like, why would I fight for that? Like, why would I argue with her at 2 a.m. over her putting her feet on me? If that's all that she brings to the table, that's what we're approaching. And you're going to have, and you're going to see, and I think it's already happening, a very radicalized voting block of young men who are desperate to change that. They're desperate. They look at the men ahead of them and they go, hey, Christian conservative beer calendars. You want to see my wife on the calendar that you can hang in your home? Like, that's what young men are like. I don't want this anymore. And I will fight tooth and nail to not have to live like this. And you see it in the Middle East in particular, with a lot of young men who don't have any access to anything like that because they've been entirely cut off. And that's how you see men go, you know what? I probably will strap this bomb to my chest and run into that building, because what else am I going to do? Because they have nothing to live for. Their purpose has been kind of like taken from them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're approaching unless we kind of fix these social issues.
Hopefully the younger women of that same age group, they're seeing the same light, right? Hopefully they're not being steered down the same path that they've been on, kind of type of thing, right? All the things that we've talked about where, young women, they end up marrying up in age for comfortability and things like that.
Right.
You see a lot of feminism movement with the young ones and stuff like that, a lot of lesbianism. So we need that same type of revival and the same type of influence to happen on that side as well, because, frankly, I don't expect some 25-year-old woman, my daughter is in that same age range. I don't expect her to sit here and watch our show and be influenced by what we're saying. So there's going to have to be another avenue for the young women as well. And I don't know what's going on that side of things, but hopefully, I think if we can shame OnlyFans culture, this whole porn industry, maybe Canada will deliver on their threat and shut America down, shut Pornhub down in America.
Who controls the porn industry?
Wouldn't that be great? Oh yeah, and we know that who really controls that is the Middle East country over there, Ben Shapiro's favorite place. But
yeah, well, I think here's an even easier one, right?
Aren't we at least a little bit alarmed that we have such a Zionist administration, but all of the policies that we expect them to fight are coming from the Zionists?
Right.
Like transgenderism, feminism,
right.
Basically all of the leftist ideologies.
Evil? You mean just evil?
Right. That's what Revelation says.
Satanic poppycock.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, here's an even easier one that this is probably my first insight into leaving the Republican Party or the conservative side, which is the issue of family court. Family court is the most ignored, but also most destructive force that's plaguing families in America. And conservatives are silent about it. They say nothing about it. It's one of those eras, and you get this ridiculous example from Jeff Younger. Now, it's not just him. I mean, he's probably just the most vocal about it and was in the news too. But he's actively every day one of the most stand-up guys I've ever seen. I applaud him a lot for the way that he handled everything that's happened to him. And you know what his number one thing is? He's like, I don't tell men to get married. There's no way I can in good conscience tell men to get married in this current day and age, because the family court system that institutionalizes it is entirely against them. And it's like, it's set out in a way that they will get destroyed by it if they don't navigate it with perfect ease and also a good amount of luck too. And where are the conservatives to say, yeah, look at the single motherhood, and then look at the rate of single fatherhood. Why are men not being awarded custody of their children 93% of the time?
Mm-hmm.
But we have the complete opposite of that. We have a society that for whatever reason, and I would largely name feminism for that, that awards to women almost outright. And you've heard the stories. I mean, men have to like literally take documentation that she's like,
Oh,
on
they treat the
meth.
men like shit in court. I've faced it myself. Look, I was a teenage
Right.
dad. They gave custody to married and divorced before I was 18. They gave custody. They made me pay child support, pay for health care. And whenever I'd go and sit in court, the lady judge and her little lady assistant that was helping her typing, I don't know what she was doing, would treat me like a criminal. It's like, bitch, my fucking daughter's at my house 2 or 3 times a week. Like, shut the fuck up and quit treating me like I'm a deadbeat dad. Like, you know,
Right.
it's just the way that it is, the way the court systems are, and you know,
Right. Well, it's just like, I mean, the party of family values, family values, family values. And it's like, yeah, what about family court? Do you want to fix that? I mean, women are destroying men in that court. What? What did you say over there? Oh yeah, best I can do is tell you women women can't play in men's sports and vice
right.
versa. It's like, if you want to be the party of family values, you have to look at the things that are plaguing them greatly. And I would imagine you can speak to this too. The ability for you to actually build your life while you are chained to a financial payment, turn into a financial wallet for another woman to raise your children while you lose custody and ability to visit them and see them. I mean, that life, it's not, unless you're making a huge amount of money, it's hard to escape that. And for
Yeah.
a lot of guys, they end up chained, unable to go anywhere, no financial mobility because they can't even save enough each month to get them a chance to go look for other things too. And so there's a lot of problems that come with that. But I think you look at the statistics, you look at single motherhood, and you look at just the insane rates that it has for children to be homeless, in prison, killed, molested, violated, all these things. Then you look at single fatherhood, and single fatherhood down the line on all of the metrics is almost identical to a child growing up in 2-parent home. And we've
Right.
had these statistics for decades now. There's
Well, they
no reason
monetize
the system should not be getting changed.
Right. Well, they've monetized that system to benefit the state. Like, if here's a good example. While paying child support, if I were to hand my kid a $100 bill, that doesn't come off of my child support. If I were to go buy her all the clothes she needed for her whole entire life, that doesn't come off my child support. It literally drove a wedge. The court system, the laws in place literally drove a wedge to where me living on a budget, surviving off of credit, couldn't afford to take my daughter and buy her anything because I couldn't afford it. And I still would have had to pay every bit of child support. And every payment you make of child support, there's $4 or $5 that goes to the state. It doesn't
Right.
go to your kid. It goes to the fucking state. And I paid it through some automated thing online. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not a convenient fee or whatever. Give my kid the extra money that you guys took from me. You know, it's incentivized to literally for the state to divide families like that, you know? And,
Right.
and it's just unfortunate because, you know, like I said, living on a budget, I couldn't just take my kid to Disney World and then be like, this is your child support for the month or whatever, even though she would have been with me for majority of the time, or how, you know what I'm saying? You don't go to Disney World for a month, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Right. No, exactly. Exactly right. And I do hate to cut it short. Didn't realize we had actually ran this long. I do actually got to take off.
Yeah, I was gonna
You know,
say we should probably wrap it up. I've been enjoying this conversation, but
Yeah, it's been good.
didn't get into a lot of the other things that we wanted to get into. But you know, I hope you guys enjoyed it in chat. I see the chat's been pretty busy. I haven't been able to read a whole lot, and when I was putting some of the stuff on screen, it was covering Donnie's face, so I didn't like
That's
that part of
okay.
it.
I'm sure people appreciate that.
Like, yeah, put mine on there. It's gonna cover Donnie. And
Why did it get so dark in here?
But man, I got to tell you, Donnie, I appreciate you coming on. I love the conversation. We got to have you on more in the future.
Anytime.
Definitely, we'll try to figure out some type of like regular schedule or something like that where just easy to do.
Right.
And
Yeah, we'll do this more in the future. That's why we wanted to make sure we were getting more guests on, make sure we're
Right.
diversifying the content, getting a bit more of argument back and forth over certain specific ideals.
right, exactly. So I appreciate everybody. I noticed that most of the people have been over on the Jar Openers podcast channel watching. It's been encouraging to see you guys go over and do that for us. I love seeing all the chat together. It's one of the things that we're trying to build a culture and a family and all that type of stuff. So don't forget to also join the Discord where you can continue these conversations, learn a little bit more about each other, go a little bit more in depth with these things and all that type of stuff if you want to. And, also make sure, even though we're trying to get things over to the Jar Openers podcast, which make sure you subscribe over there and all that, do still consider subscribing to America First TV and Atlas Thugged and on YouTube as well. We are still trying to get Atlas over 1,000 subs to get that channel monetized. And we want these two channels separate from our show so that we can have a better business layout or whatever. So anyways, Donnie, you guys got anything else you want to finish up with, and we'll get out of here?
Oh, no, you don't need to like or subscribe. You could leave me alone. If you want to argue any of the points I talked about today, you can find me shit posting in any of the podcast chats. I'm in basically all of them.
Cool.
Yeah. If you want to join our, or at least my Nazi Brigade, subscribe to Atlas Thugged. And then you can also hash these ideas out as well in our Discord too. A lot of news ahead of time comes into the Discord. So, if anything happens, we can't stream for whatever reason, or if we're talking about some other idea we're floating to the community, Discord's the best place to be to see that. Also kind of argue amongst ourselves in there too.
Right.
And, but yeah, appreciate everybody for being here. Christ is King, and should be ready for Wednesday.
Christ is King. We will see you guys on Wednesday.
Peace out, everybody. Have a good night.
With war rolling Atlas Thugged, we here to bring the truth. Jar open this podcast, we breaking through the fake news. They try to silence us, but we will be subdued. We're bearded alpha males here to save the youth. Spitting fire on the mic with the bass Christian takes, exposing the lies, keeping the demons at bay. We ain't afraid to speak up, we won't be swayed. Jar open this podcast, where the truth is laid. Jar openers, cracking open the lies. We're rolling Atlas Thugged, we're here to rise. Bearded alpha males saving the youth from the godless demons, spreading the truth. We ain't playing games, we're on a mission to awaken the masses with our intuition. Pulling out the corruption with no inhibition. Jar open this podcast, sparking a revolution. We're not afraid to stand tall in a world full of deceit. We're the voice of reason, bringing light to the street, keeping it real, never missing a beat. Jar open this podcast, where the truth meets the heat. Jar openers, cracking open the lies. We're rolling Atlas Thugged, we're here to rise. Bearded alpha males saving the youth from the godless demons, spreading the truth. Jar open this podcast, where the truth will never cease. Join us on the journey to bring back peace. We're rolling Atlas Thugged, fearless in our release. Jar open this podcast, where the lies will decrease.